She was only 9 years old, and what the police discovered in that bathroom was unforgettable. It all started when a taxi driver in Lima overheard an alarming conversation. This led the police to a small apartment in San Miguel. Although everything appeared calm inside, a closed door concealed a shocking discovery. Neighbors reported not hearing anything unusual. No screams or cries, but something terrible had occurred, and someone was concealing the truth. This is the heartbreaking story of Pierina Nicole, a little girl who did not receive the protection she deserved. Pierina Nicole was born in 2002 in Piura, a city in northwestern Peru. Her early life was significantly influenced by her mother's difficult past. Isabel Mirella Tello Chanduvi. Isabel faced a troubled childhood, having been abused by a doctor when she was just 13 years old. This traumatic event sparked a lifelong rebellion and resentment in Isabel, especially towards her parents. As an adult, Isabel had 5 children with 4 different fathers, and one of them was Pierina. Due to the instability in Isabel's life, she gave Pierina to a family friend just 1 week after the baby was born, saying she couldn't take care of her. In this new home, Pierina was lovingly embraced. Without any other small children around, she quickly became the center of the family, bringing joy and warmth to the household. Isabel continued to support Pierina financially and visited often. Alfredo Cardosa Curay, Pierina's father, remained an important figure in her life, even after he separated from Isabel and began a new family. His relationship with Pierina stayed strong. He visited her regularly and prioritized her well-being. During her early years, Pierina flourished under the care of the woman who welcomed her into her home. She received lots of love and lived in a calm environment. Pierina, known for her gentle personality and kind nature, quickly endeared herself to her neighbors. When Pierina turned 3, Isabel decided to move to Lima. From then on, she only visited her daughter once a month. As a result, the bond between mother and daughter grew weaker. During this time, Pierina's maternal grandmother, Bertha Chanduvi Garcia, became more involved in her life. However, Bertha was viewed unfavorably by some neighbors, who labeled her as an alcoholic living a troubled life. These opinions reached Pierina's caregiver. She acknowledged that even though Bertha lived nearby, they never became close. Ultimately, the responsibility for taking care of Pierina shifted more directly to her biological mother and grandmother. At first, it might have looked like a long-awaited family reunion, with a child reconnecting with her blood relative. However, the situation was much more painful. Isabel was known for her unpredictable behavior and didn't have the patience required for raising children. Her mood swings made her parenting unreliable. While she occasionally met her responsibilities, she frequently neglected them, both in daily care and in making sure her daughter went to school. At first, the abuse Pierina experienced was verbal, consisting of insults and harsh criticism. Being very young, she didn't fully understand how damaging her home life had become. Despite the hostile atmosphere, she remained kind, obedient, and loving. Alfredo tried to stay involved, but his interactions with Isabel often ended in arguments that were noticeable to their neighbors. Over time, he became increasingly aware of the mistreatment Pierina was facing, and his concern deepened. Eventually, it became clear that Isabel's verbal abuse had escalated into physical violence. With Pierina being punished severely for minor mistakes, Pierina started to feel responsible for her troubled relationship with her mother. Once, she even wrote Isabel a heartfelt letter for Mother's Day, expressing her love and asking for forgiveness for her supposed misbehavior. Unfortunately, this gesture did not change Isabel's behavior. Instead, the situation worsened. Shortly afterward, Pierina reported her mother to the police, claiming that Isabel had hit her in the head with a brick and physically assaulted her. However, her complaint did not lead to any meaningful help or intervention. Pierina's suffering continued largely unnoticed. She endured constant beatings and psychological torment. Isabel rarely took her to school, further isolating her from potential support systems. The other children in the home, Pierina's younger siblings, also suffered. Isabel had developed a cruel habit of punishing them while they were naked in the bathroom, covering their mouths with clothing to muffle their cries and avoid drawing the attention of neighbors. Realizing the severity of the situation, Alfredo started legal proceedings to gain custody of Pierina. However, the bureaucratic process was slow, and conditions in Isabel's home deteriorated further. Even Bertha could no longer ignore the problem. In April 2009, she took the shocking step of reporting her own daughter to the authorities for abusing Pierina. As a result of these serious allegations, the authorities stripped Isabel of her custody rights and temporarily placed Pierina in the care of Bertha, her maternal grandmother. While this change appeared to offer a fresh start for Pierina, her circumstances did not improve. For reasons that remain unclear, Bertha did not fulfill her responsibilities as a caretaker, neglecting to prioritize Pierina's education and well-being. Pierina began to miss school frequently, and her absences grew so common that neither her teachers nor classmates found them surprising. In 2010, a formal evaluation revealed that Pierina required the support of a dedicated adult. The evaluation warned that if she remained in her grandmother's care, she could completely disengage from the education system. Most concerning was the report's claim that Bertha might pose an even greater risk to Pierina than Isabel had. One school report indicated that from March to December 2007, Pierina's attendance was inconsistent, with no explanation provided. Another report from the following year revealed that she missed over 30% of her classes without justification. A third report from 2009 showed she attended only 35 school days. A fourth report from 2010 suggested that her academic performance could improve if her attendance issues were addressed. Upon receiving this information, Alfredo took immediate action. He filed an urgent legal request for custody and included several documents to support his case. Based on these findings, the social worker responsible for the case submitted a detailed report recommending that Pierina be placed in her father's custody. Despite the challenges she faced, Pierina remained lively, playful, social, and cheerful. However, her emotional pain was becoming apparent. She often felt sad and shared her experiences of abuse with her teacher. At that time, Alfredo was living with his wife, and the social worker confirmed that their home environment was stable. Alfredo had always fulfilled his financial and emotional responsibilities, was dedicated to providing a better life for his daughter. His efforts began to pay off when the court granted him provisional custody, but he still needed to start legal action against Bertha to obtain full custody. On June 15, 2011, Alfredo officially filed for custody of his child. During the reconciliation hearing, Bertha refused to hand over the child. This led to several weeks of legal disputes, but Alfredo remained determined. He passed 3 psychological evaluations and welcomed numerous home visits from social services. In contrast, Bertha did not show up for her evaluations and failed to bring Pierina, which raised serious concerns. In August of that year, Isabel took her daughter and relocated to Lima after Bertha made an unexpected decision to return the girl to her mother. Isabel and Pierina moved into an apartment in the San Miguel district. At 31, Isabel began dating Jonathan Nieto. She had met at a nightclub, where he claims they first crossed paths during her involvement in escort. Their relationship quickly became tumultuous and violent. Jonathan frequently stayed at the apartment, which exposed Pierina to their escalating fights, often resulting in physical altercations. Meanwhile, on November 3rd, the family court decided to skip the postponed psychological evaluations for Bertha and speed up the custody process in favor of Alfredo. They sent the case to the public prosecutor for a final decision. Before a final decision could be reached, Pierina's ordeal ended in a devastating way. Less than 2 weeks later, on November 14, 2011, a taxi driver in Lima picked up 2 women, one younger and one slightly older. What seemed like a normal ride quickly turned unsettling. During the trip, the 2 women started arguing, and the driver noticed their discussion was concerning how to create an alibi for a recent crime involving a young girl. When the taxi driver dropped them off at their destination, he quickly went to the nearest police station and reported the incident. The police took his report seriously and sent officers to the address the women provided. What they discovered confirmed the driver's worst fears. The police encountered a shocking scene inside the apartment. In the bathroom, they discovered a young girl named Pierina, just 9 years old, lying naked on the cold floor and unresponsive. Her body was marked by severe bruises, and her face had noticeable red blotches. While her mother denied any involvement in Pierina's death, Neighbors quickly spoke up, revealing that Isabel had a long history of mistreating her daughter. Many were concerned that something tragic would eventually occur. Within hours of discovering Pierina's body and transporting it to the morgue, Isabel and her boyfriend Jonathan were arrested as the main suspects in the violent murder. The interrogation that followed was lengthy and intense, with Isabel insisting she was innocent. She recounted that on the night of the incident, Jonathan returned home drunk and had scratches on his neck, which sparked a heated argument between them. According to Isabel, after hours of fighting and yelling, Jonathan left the apartment around 6. It was at this point that she revealed she had taken out her anger, not on him, but on her daughter. She claimed to have forcibly removed Pierina from her bed, stripped her of her clothes, shaved her head, and made her take a shower. Afterward, she said she allowed Pierina to return to her room to rest. In her inconsistent account, Isabel tried to blame Jonathan first and then even accused her neighbors. But detectives did not find her credible. Her numerous contradictions and her cold, emotionless behavior shocked even the most seasoned officers. When the news of Pierina's death reached her caregiver, the shock was immense. As the reality sank in, it became clear to everyone that Isabel was to blame. Alfredo, Pierina's father, hurried to Lima as soon as he received the news. Heartbroken, he went directly to the central morgue to claim his daughter's body. Meanwhile, investigators spoke with several neighbors who confirmed Isabel's story about her activities that day. She left around midday and returned a few hours later. None of the neighbors remembered hearing Pierina cry or scream, which added to the eerie atmosphere. Along with the troubling account from the taxi driver and growing discrepancies in Isabel's statements, the judge had very few doubts about the situation. Isabel was officially charged with the murder of her daughter and taken into pretrial custody as the investigation continued. When she was brought to court, a crowd gathered outside, shouting insults at her. Reporters tried to get a comment. The truth was already becoming clear. Forensic evidence and statements from officials revealed a disturbing timeline of events. On that tragic day, Isabel violently attacked her daughter in the shower, covering Pierina's mouth to muffle her cries. This was corroborated by faint marks around Pierina's lips, suggesting smothering. During the assault, Pierina lost consciousness, and Isabel, thinking her daughter was dead, left her lying motionless. The autopsy revealed signs of abuse, leading investigators to believe there was an attempt to stage the scene to implicate someone else in the crime. Forensic experts concluded that the cause of death was suffocation due to obstruction of the airway. Detectives believed Isabel's midday trip outside was a deliberate effort to create an alibi. Jonathan was cleared of any suspicion, as it was shown he was not in the apartment when the injuries occurred. There was confusion in the media regarding the identity of the woman who accompanied Isabel in the taxi. Some reports named her Bertha, while others called her Angela. Regardless, investigators confirmed that neither woman was involved in Pierina's death. Days later, Pierina's body was brought to Piura. Her father, Alfredo, carried her casket through the streets to her paternal grandmother's home, where a private wake was held, closed to the media. That afternoon at 3:30 p.m., a small funeral service took place. The brutality of Pierina's death shocked the entire nation. Beyond the horrifying crime, the case revealed significant failures in the systems designed to protect children. Many questioned, how could such a tragedy occur under the supervision of social services, and the court's outrage grew among the public. Critics pointed fingers at Bertha, who had legal custody of Pierina, but ultimately returned her to Isabel. Others criticized the family court for dismissing the social worker's urgent recommendation to place Pierina with her father. Alfredo's family announced that they would file formal complaints against Bertha and the judicial officials involved. Pierina's two younger siblings were placed in a child welfare facility where they were to undergo psychological evaluations with their extended family. Eventually, the children were transferred to the National Family Welfare Program. Later that November, Bertha sold her house and moved to Lima, reportedly hoping to distance herself from the events that had occurred. As the legal process progressed, Jonathan chose to speak publicly about his experience. In an interview, he described Isabel as a highly violent person who would use anything available like broomsticks and knives to attack him and possibly others. He also shared a shocking detail. Isabel had convinced him that her children were not actually hers, but were the offspring of a mentally unstable sister who roamed the streets. Jonathan revealed another alarming detail that highlighted the terrible conditions Pierina had faced for years. He said that the little girl didn't have any toys at all. Even more troubling, she had to sleep on the floor, lacking both love and the basic comforts that every child deserves. A year and a half after the crime, the trial against Isabel began in March 2013. During the proceedings, several important witnesses testified, including Bertha, Jonathan, Alfredo, and several of Isabel's former partners. They all described Isabel as unfit to be a mother, depicting her as violent, erratic, and emotionally unstable. Their testimonies indicated that she had abused not just Pierina, but all of her children. Isabel tried to explain her version of events regarding Pierina's death. During her testimony, she became emotional and repeated that she was innocent. Despite her claims, the evidence and witness statements were too strong to ignore. The court convicted her, and the prosecutors asked for the maximum punishment under Peruvian law, which is a life in prison. They also requested about $10,000 in civil compensation for Pierina's family. On November 7, 2013, Isabel was sentenced to life in prison. During the final hearing, the court presented results from a psychological evaluation carried out during the investigation. The report indicated that Isabel displayed psychopathic traits, calculated behavior, a concerning lack of empathy, and a total disregard for the emotional pain of others. She was characterized as someone skilled in manipulation, especially towards those she viewed as vulnerable. Her defense team filed an appeal, but the higher court rejected it and maintained the original ruling. The only change is that the sentence will be reviewed after 35 years in 2046. Bertha continued to attribute her daughter's actions to her own difficult history. However, there is no evidence that she faced any legal repercussions for her involvement in the circumstances surrounding Pierina's death, even though she was once the legal guardian. With all the information now revealed, the case of Pierina Nicole stands out as a tragic example of systemic failure. The brutal murder of Pierina Nicole, a 9-year-old girl radiant with kindness and resilience, stands as a heart-wrenching testament to the unimaginable horror of a child abused and killed by her own biological mother. Isabel Mirella Tello Shanduvi, Pierina's life, filled with love from her father and caregiver, yet shattered by her mother's relentless verbal and physical violence, ended in a tragedy that devastated Peru. Isabel's conviction brings a semblance of justice, but it cannot undo the pain of a daughter betrayed by the one meant to protect her, nor the failures of social services and courts that ignored glaring warning signs. Pierina's story is a searing call for urgent reform to ensure no child suffers such betrayal and neglect again. As Alfredo and countless others carry her memory forward, Pierina's legacy must drive a fierce commitment to protect every child's right to safety, love, and a future free from harm.
The Missouri community believes that Christianity involves more than just having the right beliefs about God. They emphasize the importance of inner devotion, moral growth, and genuine repentance. They meet at home, hold educational gatherings. The Missouri are committed to following biblical principles, which include loving one's enemies and rejecting all forms of violence. This is the kind of environment Jeffrey David Borlase was raised in. In his youth, he got a summer job at the water park in Missouri. On his very first day at work, Jeffrey met a charming girl who, like him, wanted to earn a few dollars during the school holidays. Her name was Tanya May. Jeffrey was smitten. His heart told him that he had met the one with whom he would spend his whole life. Tanya was born on September 13, 1974. She was raised in a family where Christian values were paramount, patient, indulgent, and selfless. Tanya saw in Jeffrey her other half, a wonderful husband, and a loving father. Everything happened as they hoped. They got married. Inspired by love and hope, they created a strong family. Then, 4 children were born. True to their beliefs, Jeffrey and Tanya decided to take in 4 more boys from an orphanage to raise, making a total of 8 children: Taylor, Kaya, Alexis, Meseret, Tristan, Eli, Stephen, and Meliku Borlase. As time went by, the kids grew up. Their daughter, Taylor, despite the age difference, was very close to her brothers, with whom she loved to play pranks. They also shared common interests. The children were involved in sports and music. This continued until 2015, when Taylor did not finish high school and did not move to Boone to attend Appalachian State University. However, whenever the opportunity arose, the girl visited her relatives. Meanwhile, Tristan grew up like any other child. Sometimes he got annoyed with his parents, for example, when he was not allowed to use a cell phone or social media until a certain age. He was also forbidden to date girls until he graduated from high school. Overall, all the children in the family, regardless of whether they were born in marriage or adopted, grew up in a harmonious atmosphere and were not deprived of love or affection. Their loving mother closely monitored the internal order of relations between brothers and sisters, prayed frequently, and did good deeds. There was one incident that will forever remain in Robin's memory: Tanya's compassionate mother. Her daughter sold her expensive wedding ring and replaced it with a cheap one to help build houses for residents of Haiti affected by the hurricane in December 2017. Pleasant changes occurred in the life of the family as Jeffrey, his wife, and children moved to a new house in Watauga County, North Carolina. The new house was more spacious, had a larger lot, and was located just under 2 miles from Robin. This would be very convenient, especially when help was needed with babysitting. Around the same time, Tristan, who was in high school, started to participate in track and field. Alexis and Kaya worked as counselors at summer camps. At first glance, it might seem that the Borlase household never had any problems or troubles, but this was not the case. Over time, Tristan's behavior began to raise concerns. By 2019, while in high school, he started having difficulties understanding some school subjects, and these challenges only increased day by day. In addition, sometimes the boy behaved inappropriately. Although by that time he had everything, he constantly argued with his parents about his own mobile phone and access to social media. Tristan spent a lot of time on his Instagram account. The eldest of the Borlase children, Taylor, was always interested in the lives of her brothers and sisters and noticed that Tristan often quarreled with their parents. She also learned about his other problems. Some teachers tried to push Tristan to give his all. One of them was initially saw in Tristan a smart student with great potential. However, he soon became convinced that Tristan, who was frequently late for classes, was not interested in studying at all. Tristan withdrew from the school community, was indifferent to everything, and did not want to try. It got to the point where he wore headphones during class and sat with a vacant expression. The teacher tried to help Tristan, and one day after class, they had a heart-to-heart talk. It was a very productive conversation, and Tristan assured his teacher that he would try to achieve more, but in the end, he did not see any improvements. After a while, Tristan became friends with a girl from their religious community, Evelyn. They began dating, and he sometimes shared his frustrations about his relationship with his family, mentioning the frequent quarrels with his mother and father. On April 10, 2019, Tristan's teacher called his parents to complain about his academic performance and behavior. Jeffrey and Tanya left their youngest child with his grandmother and went to the middle school to understand what was happening. That same day, Taylor received a text from her mother, asking if she knew that Tristan was using illegal substances. Later, Tanya explained to Taylor that she had taken Tristan's phone to investigate the claim. After 4 p.m., Tanya informed her mother, Robin, that the conversation with Tristan had gone well. Although they had taken away his phones and car keys until he started behaving normally and focusing on school, Tristan didn't seem upset. They returned home. They decided to take the family dog for a walk together. Before that, Jeffrey headed to his van while Tanya went into the house. Much of what happened afterward cannot be fully reconstructed, but it is clear that inside the house, Tristan suddenly attacked his mother with a knife, presumably taken from the kitchen, and stabbed her deeply. At about 5 p.m., cameras and CCTV installed outside filmed Tristan running across the yard, covered in blood. At that moment, Jeffrey saw him and got out of the car. Tristan walked up to him and suddenly attacked him. As Jeffrey ran away, he tripped, and Tristan rushed at him. First, Tristan hit him with his fist and then stabbed him multiple times. Neighbors reported that on that Wednesday at about 5:30 p.m., they heard loud screams. Tristan's hands were covered in blood. He went into the kitchen, where he had previously dragged his lifeless mother's body, picked her up, and carried her outside. Then he spent about an hour cleaning up the scene, even using a hose to wash the porch near the house. Around 8:30 p.m., Tristan went to his grandmother Robin's house to pick up his younger brother. She was surprised and asked him about his parents. He said that they had gone to the store for shopping. After about 20 minutes passed without any word from Tanya and Jeffrey, Robin felt a strong worry as such behavior was extremely unusual. At that moment, another grandson called her to tell her that his parents had not picked him up as they usually did. Robin immediately contacted Alexis and Taylor. They agreed to pick up the boy and meet together at the family home. Alexis arrived first with her boyfriend. It was already dark outside. Upon entering the house, they were horrified to see traces of blood on the carpet. Assuming that Jeffrey and Tanya might be in the storehouse, they headed there. Under the hammock, they saw Jeffrey's wrapped body. Alexis rushed to him, but her boyfriend tried to hold her back. He grabbed her and dragged her toward the house, saying that they should call 911. A few seconds later, they saw Tristan driving away in his father's black car. Despite his fleeting appearance, Alexis and her boyfriend managed to notice the blood on his face and hands. Meanwhile, Tristan contacted his friend Evelyn and went to her house. She realized that he was worried about something and also noticed several scratches on his forehead and hands. However, Tristan assured her that he had just had a fight with his parents and got the scratches while playing with his dog. Around 10:30 p.m., the detective received a report filed by Alexis. He immediately went to the scene. Seeing a bloody trail in the Borlase house, the partners followed it upstairs but found nothing. Returning to the yard, they began to search it and soon came across the body of 43-year-old Jeffrey, who had stab wounds to his abdomen. Continuing the search of the area adjacent to the house, detectives found a car in the woods. Previously, relatives had reported that Jeffrey's car had disappeared from the yard. It looked like it was an unsuccessful attempt to hide the family's white 2000 Ford pickup truck. The investigators then realized why the criminal had needed it. In the cabin was the body of 44-year-old Tanya, covered with a blanket and stuffed with bags of mulch. The police began collecting evidence, noticing red stains on the floor, the dashboard, and the rear door of the car. Considering the seriousness of the events, an experienced investigator was urgently called in due to the case of serious crimes of the Watauga County Sheriff's Department. He arrived at approximately 11:35 p.m. and examined the crime scene, after which the officers reported to him the statements they had collected from relatives. Then investigator decided to take the family to the sheriff's office, as it was necessary to document the interview with each of them. First of all, the lead investigator interviewed Robin, who explained what she had been doing that day and what she had discussed with her daughter Tanya. Then it was Taylor's turn, who also told everything she knew. Tristan was undoubtedly the prime suspect, while investigators were trying to piece together the puzzle, and the family was in a state of shock. Tristan was spending time with his girlfriend. He stayed overnight with her. The next morning they went to Walmart and McDonald's. Tristan promised they would go to class together later, but that didn't happen. Evelyn believed he simply wanted to escape his parents for a bit, so he suggested staying with a relative. That same morning, Tristan invited her to get in the car, and they drove toward Tennessee. Meanwhile, a warrant was issued for the arrest of the suspected killer, and searches continued at the suspect's residence. The investigator processed evidence from the white pickup truck, which was difficult to handle because it was on a steep incline. The truck was taken to the sheriff's office, where an agent from the North Carolina Bureau of Investigation joined the team and took a total of 737 photos from the scene. At the same time, investigator learned that Tristan had been spotted in Tennessee. He began the paperwork for extraditing the suspect and considered traveling there with Robin to speak to Tristan, given that he was a minor. Information about the car was shared with the National Crime Information Center, prompting efforts in Tennessee to locate the vehicle. The search for the car began, leading to a chase. While driving with Evelyn, Tristan notices that someone seems to be following them. He told his girlfriend that he had to hurry and sharply increased speed. She naturally did not understand what was happening. To make her less confused, Tristan suggested that his parents probably reported the car as stolen to find him faster. Tristan raced along the highway but eventually succumbed and stopped. Their car was surrounded by police cars. Evelyn was completely confused seeing Tristan handcuffed and placed in a police car. Officers noticed that Tristan did not appear upset or worried. According to the county sheriff's office, both young men's clothes were stained with blood. Police officers obtained search warrants for their mobile phones. Tristan's interrogation, conducted by investigator on April 11, 2019, was recorded on video and audio. Tristan answered all questions and did not resist. At times, he was overwhelmed with emotion and cried, but he admitted that he had killed his parents, detailed all his actions. When investigator asked him about his relationship with Jeffrey, Tristan stated that he had never feared Jeffrey's cruelty, let alone that he could hit his son. Tristan also mentioned that he wanted to go back to the house but got scared when he saw police cars and fled. Accused of 2 counts of murder, Tristan Borlase was taken into custody without bail, set to appear in court on May 7, 2019. In later statements, the Watauga County Sheriff remarked that the local population had never faced such serious danger, explaining that such incidents are unpredictable and very rare. This was, of course, very sad. Speaking to local media, the district attorney thanked everyone for their joint efforts, stating that the high level of dedication shown during the investigation and the search for the truth should inspire society. The autopsy report on Tanya's body indicated that she had been stabbed several times, including in the left chest, back, and arm. She had received multiple stab wounds to her left arm, likely caused by defensive actions. Blunt trauma to the head, neck, torso, and limbs were also identified. There were reports of suffocation injuries that the victim may have sustained during neck compression. As for Jeffrey, the autopsy revealed multiple stab wounds to his left chest and back, in addition to cut wounds to his arms and hands, abrasions to his scalp and forehead, blunt force trauma to his torso and limbs. Jeffrey and Tanya's funeral took place on April 17, 2019, at the Alliance Bible Fellowship. Relatives of the victims wrote a mournful obituary in which all 7 children expressed that Tanya and Jeffrey never had the opportunity to live for themselves, as they always lived only for their children. Instead of flowers, memorial contributions to the family fund were requested. By this time, search warrants had been issued to examine data from home surveillance cameras, video call accounts allegedly belonging to Tristan, and a total of 5 mobile phones that could contain information related to the crime. Having gained access to the CCTV footage, detective investigator began reconstructing the chronology of events. The investigators continued their work. Inside the car, they found Tristan's report card from Watauga County School, several pens, electronic cigarettes, a plastic container with purchases, and a receipt from McDonald's issued at 6:40 a.m. on April 11, 2019. Additionally, they found a North Carolina driver's license issued in the name of Jeffrey Borlase in the glove compartment. In the driver's side door compartment was a black pocket knife with stains on the blade that looked like blood. A week after Tristan's arrest, Taylor visited him in jail for the first time and was unpleasantly surprised by his behavior. Tristan was not only unrepentant but also tried to blame others for what happened. He was convinced that sooner or later he would regain his freedom. Taylor felt disgusted, turned around, and left. Her second visit was on May 11th, on the occasion of Tristan's birthday. This time, she brought Robin. However, this meeting was almost indistinguishable from the previous one. For Taylor, such behavior was unacceptable, especially considering that their parents had died tragically, and she was now responsible for taking care of her orphaned brothers and sisters. After 3 weeks, the neighbors decided to help the Borlase children, organized a fundraising campaign to cover the costs of maintaining the property, food, gasoline, car insurance, and clothes. During this time, Tristan had phone conversations from the prison cell, where he insisted on a new version of events. According to him, his mother first attacked him from behind while he was sitting at the table doing his homework. The trial of Tristan began on February 16, 2022. His lawyer stated that his client was responsible for murder, but not for the charge of first-degree murder. The prosecution, Assistant District Attorney Jasmine McKinney, told jurors that despite being a very large family with children who were not always well-behaved, they never lacked love. Testimonies were heard from 5 witnesses, 2 of whom were law enforcement officers, and 3 were relatives of the victims, including Robin, Taylor, and Alexis. On February 17th, the jury was presented with diagrams of the crime scene, obtained from photographic work. Also on this day, Evelyn testified. On February 20th, during the 4th day of the trial, 3 witnesses were questioned. On the 5th day, a pathologist shared her findings, although Tristan's defense objected to the display of post-mortem photographs of Jeffrey and Tanya. The judge allowed the images to be shown, ensuring that they were not extreme, pointless, or used solely to incite passion. Using post-mortem diagrams and autopsy footage taken by an experienced photographer, the pathologist noted that both deceased individuals had small abrasions on their palms and forearms, indicating they were trying to defend themselves from the weapon used by the criminal. Jeffrey and Tanya attempted to shield themselves with their hands when they were attacked, but unfortunately, it was to no avail. She reported that the cause of death for both spouses was stab wounds to the body. After the lunch break, the prosecution called Tristan for questioning. He was asked to describe what his father and mother were like. Tristan said that in their house, they always loved to read and laughed a lot, but there was also constant chaos due to the large number of children and animals. He noted that Jeffrey and Tanya focused on raising their children, teaching them to help each other and show compassion. Tristan remembered having disagreements with his parents but believed they never crossed the line. Rather, there was always an opportunity to discuss problems and misunderstandings openly. Detective investigator was called to the courtroom and testified using video recordings from surveillance cameras. The 9th day of the trial took place on February 28, 2022. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury found Tristan Borlase guilty and sentenced him to 2 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. In a later statement, the district attorney expressed his sincere hope that this decision would bring closure to the Borlase family. According to the latest news, Tristan faces additional charges for a fight in prison. Tristan was charged with a misdemeanor for assaulting another inmate, allegedly punching him in the face and kneeing him in the chest. Taylor and Alexis continue to care for the children and console them with the hope that their parents are not in pain and are looking down on them from heaven, concerned for each of their children. The children will never forget the love and care their mom, dad surrounded them with. Undoubtedly, Jeffrey and Tanya Borlase became symbols of kindness and mercy, which they generously bestowed upon the world during their lives. In 1995, 11-year-old Lacey Phillips lived with her mother, Mary, her father, James, and her older siblings. Brother Jesse, who was 15 at the time, and sister Darla, who was 17. The family was very close-knit and had a strong bond. The Phillips family lived in their own home in a small town called Bald Knob, Arkansas, which they had moved to 5 years earlier from Hope, Arkansas. They considered Bald Knob an ideal place for family life and raising children. Mary was known as a loving mother and wife, fond of gardening, outdoor recreation. The Phillips family was a typical American family, slowly building their happiness, unaware of how cruelly it would eventually be destroyed. On June 6, 1995, 11-year-old Lacey was under the supervision of her older sister, Darla. Both were students, but summer vacation had begun. Their mothers go to work during this time and often the children will stay at home waiting for their parents to return. However, at 4 p.m. that day, Lacey had an appointment with the dentist, which coincided with Mary's end of her work shift. Consequently, Darla drove Lacey to the workplace, where their mother worked as an accountant in an automated tax and accounting service. It was planned that Lacey would wait until her mother finished work and then go to the appointment together. Darla later described this outing as completely ordinary. She talked with Mary for a while, and then Darla went home, planning to meet her friends later. She and her mother said goodbye and hugged, unaware that this would be their last meeting. Although Mary and Lacey were expected to be a little late coming back from the dentist, it was merely a routine checkup that wasn't supposed to take long. Meanwhile, Jesse and Darla were left alone at home. Their father was on a business trip 500 kilometers away. The siblings expected their mother and Lacey to return by 5 p.m., but as much more time passed with no sign of mother, they began to worry. At around 6 p.m., both teenagers grew increasingly worried as neither returned from the dentist's office. Lacey is too young to have her own plans, and Mary had no other plans for the evening. Even if something had changed, Mary always called the children to inform them if she would be late. Her uncharacteristic absence without warning heightened their concern. Darla assumed her mother might be late at work, so she called the office but received no answer. Concerned, she then headed to the dental clinic, but there was no sign of Mary or Lacey. Time passed, and as the sun began to set, Darla contacted their father to share their growing worries. He suggested they leave the house and look around the area, considering that Mary's car might have broken down or she might need help. Jesse and Darla searched the vicinity but found nothing. They returned to their house and reported their findings to their father, prompting him to contact the police. A dispatch officer spoke to James to gather necessary information. He provided details about where Mary worked, the car she drove, and their trip to the dentist set for around 4 p.m. The most alarming fact was that Mary and Lacey never reached the dentist. Law enforcement took James's report seriously, confirming that no one had arrived at the dental office. Around midnight, an officer was dispatched to check Mary's workplace. Upon arrival at the parking lot in front of the building, the patrolman noticed a pickup truck parked alone. After checking the license plate, he confirmed it was indeed Mary Phillips' vehicle. This discovery intensified fears that something had gone terribly wrong. The car was intact and locked, so the officer decided to check the office where Mary worked. He knocked on the door, which surprisingly opened because it was unlocked. Upon entering, he found the lights were off and had to use a flashlight to explore. It was then that he discovered something horrifying: the body of a woman covered in blood, with her hands tightly bound behind her back. A cord from a household appliance was wrapped around her neck, and her clothes were pulled down. The officer immediately realized she had been brutally beaten. A pulse check indicated she was dead. The body was cold, suggesting she had been killed hours earlier. The office resembled the aftermath of a violent struggle, with blood scattered around, intensifying concerns that the perpetrator might still be present. The patrolman called for reinforcements and continued to carefully inspect the rooms while waiting for his colleagues to arrive. He checked the office and then moved to the utility rooms, where he noticed a trail of blood leading to another door, which was also unlocked. He entered without any problems and saw a gruesome scene. In the middle of the room was a chair to which a girl was tied, also covered in blood. There was especially a lot of blood. Her face showed clear signs of having received several blows to the head. Thought the girl was dead, he managed to take several pictures of the second victim when she suddenly woke up, opened her eyes, and looked in his direction. Later, the police officer recalled this moment as one of the most terrible and unexpected in his life, as if he had seen a dead person returning to life. The patrolman immediately turned to his colleagues and, in addition to requesting reinforcements, asked them to call for doctors. He freed the girl and tried to provide first aid, but it quickly became obvious that she was in serious condition and that only doctors could fully help her. Despite her injuries, she was conscious and could speak. She clearly stated that her name was Lacey Phillips. The only thing that worried her was her mother's condition. She asked several times what had happened to Mary and if everything was okay with her, but the policeman distracted her from these troubling thoughts, not telling her the truth. The medics arrived a few minutes later, and Lacey was urgently taken to the nearest medical facility. On the way, she regained consciousness and then lost it again. Lacey had sustained a serious head injury from several strong blows to the head with a blunt object. Additionally, marks were found on her neck indicating strangulation, and in addition to sustaining a fracture in her cranial vault, she had a broken jaw. Mary's husband, James, was notified that something had happened to his loved ones but was given no details. He immediately packed his things and left for the city to see his daughter in the hospital to support her. He was shocked and did not understand what had happened to his family. Now, the doctors did not dare to provide a prognosis on whether the Phillips' youngest daughter, Lacey, would survive. An even greater blow was the death of 34-year-old Mary. She could not be saved and had died before the patrolman arrived. Forensic experts worked at the crime scene but were unable to find any clues that would lead to the criminal. Their only hope was Lacey, who had miraculously survived the attack, and they awaited news from the medical center with excitement. A few hours later, doctors managed to stabilize Lacey's condition. The morning after the attack, on June 7th, she woke up in hospital. She was in the intensive care unit, and they were finally able to communicate. Despite her traumatic brain injury, she remembered perfectly what had happened. Later, Lacey admitted that all of it was captured in her memory. Lacey began to recount the frightening details of how her older sister had taken her to their mother's workplace at about 3 p.m. She remained in the office until 3:45 p.m., as both of them were getting ready to go to the dentist's office for a routine checkup. The workday was almost over. But a few minutes before it ended, an unfamiliar man entered the office. He immediately headed to the desk where Mary worked. She and Mary looked at him and even stepped back. There was something frightening in his gaze, but they thought he was just a client who had come into the office. When the stranger raised his hands, it became obvious that he was not there for advice. He was wearing latex gloves. In one hand, he held a roll of wire, and in the other, a gun with which he threatened Mary and Lacey. The man announced that it was a robbery. Mary tried to cover herself and protect her daughter, but he pushed Mary's aside, knocked her to the floor, and began tying her wrists behind her back with the wire. Lacey was confused, scared, and unable to react. Everything happened too quickly. After tying up Mary, the unknown man shouted at Lacey and ordered her to follow him into another room. He brought a chair from Mary's office, placed it in the middle of the room, and forced she to sit on it while he tied her hands to the chair behind her back. She cried, begged him not to harm her and her mother. The criminal said he would not harm Mary but would hurt her daughter. After securing Lacey to the chair with wire, he immediately hit her hard on the head with the handle of the pistol. Her eyes went dark, and she lost consciousness. After which, the stranger left the room, closing the door behind him. Lacey was left alone. She was tightly tied up and couldn't even move. She felt like she was bleeding from her head. Lacey regained consciousness a few minutes later, looked around, and saw that blood was all around the chair. She was in pain, but she couldn't imagine the extent of the head injury she had sustained. She began to scream and call for help, hoping that her mother would enter the room and untie her. The door swung open, and to her horror, it was the same man again. He was furious that she was still alive and screamed, striking she again before grabbing her by the neck and beginning to strangle her until she lost consciousness once more. This lasted for several minutes. Perhaps the criminal was afraid of being caught, so he wanted to escape from the building as quickly as possible. He believed he had killed Lacey, turned off the light, and left the room. The criminal immediately fled the office. Several hours passed. Lacey came to her senses but then lost consciousness again. Each time she regained consciousness, she tried to get free and call for her mother but received no response. Her hands were tightly bound with metal wire. Lacey grew weaker with every minute. The only hope for salvation was the thought that someone would find them. About 8 hours passed during which Lacey remained locked in the dark room, bleeding. She was half asleep, could barely move, and had lost all strength. Suddenly, the girl heard a faint clicking sound coming from the next room. At first, she was scared that it was the attacker, but then the sounds were repeated next to her, and flashes appeared in her half-asleep state. Lacey realized it looked like a photo shoot. She confirmed it when she opened her eyes and saw someone taking her picture. Fortunately, it was not the criminal. It was a policeman who had arrived at the office to check on Lacey. Lacey remembered how the ambulance had arrived, how the policeman freed her. She was losing and regaining consciousness on the way to the intensive care unit of the nearest children's hospital. All this time, the doctors talked to her to keep her conscious. At each moment of clarity, Lacey tried to find out what had happened to her mother, but she never received an answer to any of her questions. Even now, while talking to the police, she still did not know that Mary was dead. After the police visit to the hospital, her father, brother, and sister came into the ward. They brought balloons and soft toys. Lacey still believed that her mother, like her, was in the hospital and had probably also suffered at the hands of the attacker but was still alive. The whole day of June 7th, Lacey's relatives spent with she, but they never answered any of her questions about Mary. She saw how, with each passing moment, her father's eyes filled with tears. Doubt began to creep in, but at that time, Lacey was still too weak and simply pushed away the bad thoughts. In the evening, James gathered his strength, went up to his daughter, knelt down, and hugged her. In a trembling voice, he told her that Mary was now in heaven with her great-grandmother. The detective leading the investigation could not afford to be sentimental, as the criminal responsible for the attack was still on the loose and might strike again. The local residents were in danger, and the bloodthirsty killer had to be stopped urgently. When Lacey found out about this, she realized with horror that she was the only chance for the police to catch the criminal. She also understood that she was in great danger and that the attacker might return to eliminate her as an unwanted witness. In the office where he committed the murder and attempted murder, the stranger left no traces. He managed to avoid leaving evidence by using latex gloves, which Lacey reported. However, he left biological fluids after abusing Mary, but their examination would take time, and the research capabilities of that era were much more modest. Therefore, the results only allowed the police to limit the circle of suspects, which at that point was not substantial. The criminal was likely an experienced killer. He knew how to avoid being caught, acted covertly, and used gloves. However, the police still had the main source of information, Lacey. She remembered the attacker perfectly and provided a very detailed description, including the smallest details of his clothing, appearance. Having learned that this man had taken her mother away from her, she was determined to bring him to justice. Describing the face of the criminal, Lacey suddenly recalled one important detail. Before he struck her on the head, while he had tied her hands with metal wire, she noticed a teardrop tattoo on his face, as well as a tattoo on his arm. This detail allowed the detectives to match these distinctive features with registered criminals. Detectives quickly identified a 31-year-old man named Jack Jones, who had the tattoos described by Lacey. Jack was well known to the local police for multiple robbery charges, but investigators did not suspect that he was responsible for much more serious crimes. The police quickly discovered Jack Jones's last known residence and went to apprehend him, expecting that he might already be on the run. To their surprise, Jack personally opened the door, did not seem alarmed at all. He was immediately brought to the station for questioning. While being taken to the department, detectives contemplated what tactics to employ to get the criminal to talk. To their surprise, no tricks were needed. As soon as Jack was asked about Mary and Lacey, he calmly began to recount what had happened. He stated that he had seen Mary standing in her office early that same day while he was driving past. As soon as it happened, he decided that he wanted to kill her because he found her incredibly beautiful. He returned later, knowing that the office closed around 4 p.m., when there should have been no one there. However, he saw a girl there but did not retreat. He tied up Lacey in the room because he was not interested in her. His goal from the very beginning was Mary. He bound her hands behind her back, placed her on the floor, abused her, and then cut a cord from the kettle, wrapped it around her neck, and began to strangle her. According to Jack Jones, this murder was an act of revenge for the abuse of his wife, as her attacker remained unpunished. The investigation revealed that Jack's wife did report the crime to the police, but later she retracted her statement against the abuser, leading to his release. Jack insisted that his wife was indeed abused, but why Mary had to pay for it remained a mystery. On the evening of June 7, 1995, Jack Jones was arrested for the abuse and murder of Mary. He was also charged with the attempted murder of Lacey. When the Phillips family was informed, everyone breathed a sigh of relief, as no one could be sure that the killer wouldn't come back to eliminate the only witness. However, their fight was just beginning, as Jack still had to be brought to justice in court. Thanks to his confession, there should not be any problems. Lacey did not want to attend the hearings to avoid further trauma, but the existing evidence against him was enough to send him to prison. The trial began in April of 1996. By that time, law enforcement officials had carefully reviewed all the evidence against Jack. It was decided to show in court a recording of Lacey's account, made on a dictaphone while she was recovering from her injuries in the hospital. She quickly recovered physically, but psychologically she was broken. However, even in such a state, she wanted justice. The defense attorney tried to refute her statement, but the jury did not believe him. The defendant himself pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming that he was not himself during the attack on the mother and daughter because he was treating his bipolar disorder with illegal drugs. His arguments about a difficult childhood were also unconvincing. Ultimately, the jury found Jack Jones guilty on all counts. For the murder of Mary Phillips, he was sentenced to death by lethal injection. For the brutal beating of Lacey, he received a life sentence along with an additional 30 years and a fine of $15,000 for the attempted murder of Lacey. But this was not the end of Jack's criminal story. While on death row, he confessed to another murder, that of 32-year-old Lori Barrett. This incident occurred during her 5-day vacation in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where she planned to visit friends. Because she arrived late, she didn't want to bother her friend's family and decided to stay at a hotel instead. That evening, Barrett went to a local bar to relax after her trip. There, she met a young man with several tattoos. According to several witnesses who spoke to the police, Barrett was seen drinking with the stranger until about 2 a.m. in the hotel patio. After that, they went up in the elevator together, presumably to her room. The next day, she failed to show up for a planned barbecue with her friend. Later, a cleaning lady went to her room and found her body, which had been abused and strangled. Jack Jones confessed to this murder in 2005, claiming that he liked Barrett right away, and they spent the whole evening together before going up to her room. However, the details of what happened next and the reason for the attack remain unknown, as Jack refused to disclose them. For the trial related to this case, he was extradited to Florida and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, after which he was returned to Arkansas to await execution. Interestingly, Jack Jones could have been caught and convicted of this crime while it was still being committed. A composite sketch was created based on witness statements and footage from the hotel's security cameras. His sister identified him after seeing the sketch in a newspaper and showed it to their father, who insisted that she never talk about the event or show Jack's image to anyone else. She complied, remaining silent. Jack's father then put him on a bus and sent him to Arkansas to prevent anyone from recognizing him based on the composite sketch. Unfortunately, it cost Mary Phillips her life. When Jack's family was questioned about the story, they admitted that they knew their son had met with Barrett before the attack but did not believe that Jack could be involved in such a brutal crime. Consequently, the father decided not to contact the police. They described Jack as a very complex person who grew increasingly gloomy and cruel with age, taking out his anger not only on his siblings but also on his parents. However, they justified his behavior until the last moment, believing he could be loving and gentle. They did not think he was capable of murder. On April 24, 2017, 52-year-old Jack Jones was executed for the murder of Mary Phillips at the Cummins unit, along with abuser-murderer Marcel Williams, marking the first double execution in the country in 17 years. Jones and Williams were 2 of 4 inmates executed in Arkansas in April 2017, the other 2 being convicted murderers Liddell Lee and Kenneth Williams. Jones's last meal consisted of fried chicken, fries with tartar sauce, beef jerky, 3 candy bars, a chocolate milkshake, and juice. Lacey, now grown, was present at the execution. When Jack was given his last words, he turned to the victim's daughter, tenderly called her by name, and claimed that he had perceived her as his daughter all his life. Naturally, this only caused her disgust and anger. After the execution, it was revealed that Jack Jones was involved in another murder. Just before his execution, he gave his sister a letter he had written in 2006, with instructions to open it a year after his execution. She respected his request. When she finally opened the letter from her brother, she read a terrible confession. On May 2, 1983, 20-year-old Regina Harrison left her house in the evening to ride her bike. At that time, 19-year-old Jack Jones was riding his bike towards the beach. He meets Regina, who catches his eye, and secretly follows her to a deserted street, where he attacks, abuses, and kills her. They began to search for her that same evening after Regina did not return home at the appointed time. The next day, her body was found in a nearby park with signs of abuse and strangulation, which became the cause of death. During the investigation of this crime, detectives found a witness who identified the criminal as Ronald Stewart, who was passing by the park at the approximate time of the murder. In January of 1985, Ronald pleaded guilty and was then sentenced to 50 years in prison. He died behind bars of cancer in 2008. It later turned out that the only reason an innocent man took the blame was that Ronald Stewart had already committed a series of abuses of other girls. He had been convicted of those crimes and was now afraid of the death penalty, so he made a deal with the prosecution and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Ronald never denied his guilt during his lifetime, but DNA testing later showed that he was not guilty of Regina's murder. After Jack Jones' sister, Lynn, went to the police and handed over the letter confessing to the murder, DNA testing was conducted, and in February 2019, his words were officially confirmed: Jack was behind Regina's murder. Before the execution, he lost one of his legs due to diabetes. He stated that he was ready to die, and it remains unknown why he confessed to the murders of Mary and Barrett but did not do the same regarding Regina Harrison until he only mentioned it in a letter to his sister. After the execution, it became official that Jack had killed at least 3 young women. Law enforcement officials now believe that he could have been involved in more brutal crimes. Mary's widower, after Jack's death, spoke out against people who expressed support for the criminal. There were supporters of the killer who believed that he deserved a lighter sentence and demanded that the execution be cancelled. However, James said that he did not believe they would have maintained such a loyal attitude towards the criminal if he had killed their loved ones. Lacey, after talking to journalists, said that she could finally move on with her life. Justice had finally prevailed, and this dangerous criminal would no longer be able to harm anyone. However, even despite the execution, she believed that she would never be able to completely free herself from the consequences of the horror she had endured. Stacy DeGrandchamp, a 17-year-old high school student from Fort Wayne, dreamed of attending Ball State University to pursue a career in computer technology. As an only child raised by a single mother, Stacy was described as confident, beautiful, and popular. However, her popularity often led to jealousy from others. On August 15, 2002, Stacy attended a party with approximately 20 people. Tragically, the night took a devastating turn when a fight broke out outside the house, leaving Stacy severely injured. She was rushed to the hospital but passed away shortly after. It took 17 years to solve the case, as witnesses were initially unwilling to come forward. In the spring of 2002, Stacy met Brandon Muff, a recent graduate of Fort Wayne High School, at a party. Brandon, who was in his early 20s, had a rebellious bad boy persona that Stacy found irresistible. She quickly fell for him and started spending time with his circle of friends. This group included girls Amanda Richards, Whitney McGee, and Holly Boisvert, who often hosted gatherings at Holly's house. Her home, which included a pool, became a popular hangout spot as her father gave the teens free rein. While Stacy appeared to fit in with the group, her presence reignited old tensions between her and Holly. The conflict between Stacy and Holly traced back to middle school. At an 8th grade pool party at Holly's house, she had mocked and splashed Stacy in front of others, causing Stacy to leave the gathering embarrassed. Although the two seem to have made up over time, old grudges resurface when Stacy joins Holly's group of friends as Brandon's girlfriend. Holly had previously dated Brandon, and while their relationship had ended, she still had lingering feelings for him. Stacy's budding romance with Brandon upset Holly, leading to renewed friction. However, this time Stacy did not let herself be intimidated like before. By the summer of 2002, the tension between Stacy and Holly had escalated. Holly began spreading rumors about Stacy, turning others in the group against her. At the same time, Stacy's relationship with Brandon started to unravel. Realizing she was on the wrong path, Stacy made a pivotal decision just weeks before her senior year of high school. She broke up with Brandon, distanced herself from his crowd, and began focusing on her future. She cut ties with most of the group, apart from a new friend she had made that summer, Abby Oswald. Determined to turn her life around, Stacy began preparing for the college years ahead. Abby, A friend of Brandon met Stacy through him. On August 15, 2002, they spent the day together. They decided to go to the mall, as Abby was shopping for a prom outfit. Later, Abby suggested they attend a party at Brandon's house, where he lived with his roommate, Justin. Stacy was hesitant at first, but Abby convinced her to go. Around 9:30 p.m., they arrived at the house. Shortly before 11 p.m., the Fort Wayne Police Department, along with firefighters and paramedics, responded to a 911 call from the Guthrie Street area. Earlier, in the early evening, the police were called due to complaints about loud music and a small party. However, they left without further intervention. This time, when emergency responders arrived, they found a young woman lying in the driveway, bleeding from her chest. She was rushed to a trauma center in Fort Wayne, but her injuries proved fatal. Abby later explained to detectives what had transpired. When she and Stacy arrived at the party, Brandon and a woman, Holly, were sitting together on the porch. Stacy confronted Holly, questioning her presence. The argument quickly escalated into a physical fight. They pulled each other's hair, punched, kicked, and rolled on the grass. At one point during the fight, Stacy gained the upper hand and kicked Holly in the head or face. Suddenly, Stacy appeared to lose strength and went limp. At that moment, Brandon intervened. He grabbed Stacy by her ankles and dragged her toward the trash cans. Once in the yard, she managed to stand up and stagger down the driveway, but only a few seconds later, she passed out. Brandon went to check on her, lifted her shirt, and noticed that her bra was soaked in blood. That was when they called 911. Both Holly and Brandon were taken to the police station for questioning. Forensic experts arrived at the scene and taped off the area. They began taking photos and videos of the crime scene. Since Stacy was bleeding from the chest, investigators suspected that a weapon had been used. However, no sharp objects or knives were found in the backyard or driveway. After obtaining a search warrant, detectives entered the house and seized several kitchen knives from the table. Meanwhile, at the hospital, doctors worked in the operating room to save Stacy's life. She had a stab wound to her upper chest and another to her abdomen. Despite their efforts, she succumbed to her injuries. With her death ruled a homicide, the Fort Wayne police began an official investigation. At the station, Holly provided her version of events. She claimed she had no part in Stacy's injuries, stating that they had only argued and fought. Holly denied having a knife and suggested that Stacy might have fallen onto glass in the trash can. Brandon was also interviewed, and his blood-stained shirt was collected as evidence. He claimed he had pulled Stacy by her ankles to break up the fight but didn't realize how hard he had been pulling. He also suggested that she might have been injured by broken glass from the trash can. However, Holly and Brandon's statements didn't align with the evidence. Photos of the crime scene showed no broken glass in or around the trash cans. Moreover, there was no blood near them. The coroner's report confirmed that Stacy's injuries were caused by a sharp knife blade, as they were clearly stab wounds. Nevertheless, no knife was found at the scene or on Holly and Brandon at the time. They were then released, but the investigation into Stacy's death remained ongoing. On August 19, 2002, Stacy was laid to rest, dressed in the outfit she had planned to wear for her prom photo. Her funeral was crowded, with many of her friends from parties attending: Abby, Whitney, and Amanda. Notably absent was Holly, but Brandon attended, drawing everyone's attention. His presence surprised many, as rumors were swirling at Wayne High School that he and his friends had manipulated Stacy into attending the party where Holly could confront her. This raised suspicions among investigators about whether the incident was a premeditated plot by Holly to harm Stacy. Following Stacy's death, Holly became a social outcast as most people believed she was responsible. However, another rumor implicated Whitney. A few days before Stacy's death, Whitney had left a message on Stacy's answering machine, advising her to be careful. When a detective questioned Whitney about the message, she insisted it wasn't a threat but rather a warning. Whitney claimed she knew Holly wanted to pick a fight with Stacy and hoped to prevent the two from encountering each other. While Whitney may have been trying to keep Stacy and Holly apart, Brandon seemed to do the opposite. Whitney revealed to detectives that Brandon had called Holly on August 15 and pressured her to attend the party, warning her that if she didn't come, he would never speak to her again. Investigators began considering whether he had orchestrated the situation to provoke a confrontation between Holly and Stacy. She had just broken up with Brandon, which had hurt his self-esteem. Detectives speculate that revenge, combined with Holly's jealousy, may have led to Stacy's death. Abby, Stacy's new friend, played a significant role in convincing her to attend the party. Abby encouraged Stacy to go because she was friends with Brandon. Investigators later questioned Abby's motives, wondering why she would push Stacy to attend the party at the Guthrie Street house when Holly might be there. They suspected that she could have been involved in a plan to put Stacy in harm's way. However, Abby denied any involvement and claimed that she had actually tried to stop the fight that occurred that night. The investigation eventually shifted its focus to Brandon, leading detectives to speak with his roommate, Justin. On August 26, Justin was interviewed by law enforcement and became a key witness. He stated that when he had tried to break up the fight between Stacy and Holly, Brandon had stopped him and told him to let them fight, as if Brandon had been enjoying the confrontation. He also revealed that Brandon later asked him to tell the police that Holly hadn't done anything and that Stacy had simply fallen. This statement made detectives extremely suspicious. They believed Brandon might know important details but was either too scared to share them or deliberately trying to hinder their investigation. Brandon was questioned again, but during his second interview, he refused to provide any new information. He claimed he wasn't a snitch and denied seeing Holly with a knife. Detectives were convinced that Holly was responsible for the crime, but no witnesses were willing to admit they had seen anything, and no murder weapon was ever found. Without these crucial pieces of evidence, the authorities were unable to charge or arrest anyone. As time passed, weeks, months, and eventually years, the case went cold. 17 years after Stacy's death, no one had been held accountable, and no progress had been made in solving the case. It remained unsolved, leaving everyone involved frustrated and confused. Stacy's cousin, Jamie McMillan, refused to let the case fade into obscurity. Determined to find justice, Jamie reached out to Detective Brian Martin, who specialized in unsolved cases. In March 2019, Jamie urged Detective Martin to revisit the case. She suggested interviewing Brandon, Holly, Abby, and Amanda again, hoping that, with the passage of time, the witnesses might be more willing to talk and share the truth. Everyone who had attended the party that night was now older, and perhaps they had reflected on their lives and would finally provide new information that could advance the investigation. Detective Martin begins questioning Abby, who continues to deny ever seeing the knife, just as she did 17 years ago. Next, he interviewed Brandon, who appeared deeply remorseful and admitted the incident had weighed on him for years. However, Brandon also stated that he couldn't recall seeing Holly with a knife. About a month later, Detective Martin located Holly in Wisconsin. Holly was initially hesitant to open the door, but when she eventually did, Detective Martin introduced himself and explained that he was investigating an unsolved case. Holly turned visibly pale. When the detective asked whether she remembered the party, their conversation quickly revealed some surprising details. During their discussion, Holly repeatedly referred to Stacy as her friend. Holly admitted they had been difficult teenage girls, but Stacy was still her friend. She firmly stated that she would never intentionally harm Stacy or threaten Stacy with a knife. She then admitted that she had owned a folding knife at the time and usually carried it for protection. When the detective asked if she had the knife with her during the fight with Stacy, Holly left the room and returned with the very same knife in hand. Detective Martin was shocked. He believed it could potentially be the weapon that had eluded investigators for 17 years. Back in Fort Wayne, Detective Martin began gathering additional information. Although initial test results showed that Stacy's DNA was not found on Holly's knife, the detective conducted further analysis. He later consulted Dr. Wagner, the chief pathologist on the case, who reviewed Stacy's autopsy photos. Wagner concluded that the knife was consistent with the stab wounds Stacy had suffered. On March 25, 2020, Holly, who was now 33 years old, was arrested. After years of silence, Amanda, a friend and the main witness, finally decided to speak up. She had been with Holly the night of the party and revealed that Holly had a knife with her that evening. She recalled Holly bringing the knife along when they arrived at the house and asking Amanda to hold it in her purse. Later, as she and another friend, Whitney, were preparing to leave, Holly asked for the knife back. Amanda saw nothing unusual about this and handed it over. As Amanda and Whitney were leaving, Stacy arrived at the house. Although Amanda remained silent for nearly 2 decades, her testimony could have helped the police solve the case much sooner. With Amanda's statement and additional evidence, authorities were able to reconstruct the incident leading up to Stacy's death. At the center of this tragic story was Brandon, a former graduate of Fort Wayne High School. He was the quintessential bad boy and, despite his flaws, attracted Stacy. Their relationship marked a turning point in Stacy's life, as she became involved with Brandon's social circle, a group known for their partying. Holly, who had dated Brandon before Stacy, still harbored feelings for him. Her lingering affection, coupled with Brandon's manipulative tendencies, deepened her resentment toward Stacy. He enjoyed the attention and often fostered rivalry between Holly and Stacy, which fueled his ego. This animosity came to a head on August 15, 2002. Stacy had received an invitation to a party despite her friends' concerns about its location. She chose to attend anyway. When she arrived, she found Holly with Brandon, further escalating the tension. An argument broke out and quickly turned violent. When Holly realized she was losing the fight, she stabbed Stacy twice with the knife. After years of investigation and consultation with Stacy's family, the Allen County Circuit Court offered Holly a plea bargain. She confessed to stabbing Stacy, which caused Stacy's death, and insisted that neither Brandon nor anyone else was involved. She acted alone. On January 14, 2022, Holly Boisvert was sentenced to 25 years in prison as part of the plea agreement, with 5 years suspended and 3 years of probation. Accounting for the time she has already served in credits for good behavior, she could be released as early as 2030. Oregon City is a small town located approximately 30 kilometers from Portland, Oregon, in the United States. It is generally a peaceful place, but some areas face issues with disorder and high crime rates. The town has a population of about 30,000 residents, including families like the Ponds and the Gaddis's. In 2002, the town's reputation was severely harmed by a series of shocking incidents. On the morning of January 9, 2002, 12-year-old Ashley Pond was getting ready for school. She had breakfast with her younger siblings and left her home at 8 a.m., heading for the school bus stop, an 8-minute walk from her apartment complex. She lived with her family in a low-income neighborhood, known for its industrial areas and frequent police presence due to domestic conflicts, burglaries, and other crimes. Ashley was a vibrant and talented girl who loved dancing and had plans to attend dance lessons after school that day. Her mother thought she would be home late because she had to attend dance class. However, by 6 p.m., Ashley still had not come home, which caused her mother to worry. First, she called the dance studio and found out that Ashley had not shown up for class. Growing increasingly alarmed, she began contacting Ashley's school and her friends. No one had seen her all day. Her friends mentioned that she hadn't even made it to school. This was unusual, as Ashley was a responsible and obedient student with no history of skipping school or running away. After exhausting all other options, her mother contacted the police to report that she was missing, providing a detailed description of her daughter. She was convinced Ashley hadn't run away and feared she had been abducted. However, detectives were initially skeptical. Ashley's mother had a troubled past. She struggled with alcoholism, had given birth to Ashley when she was only 16, and had several other children she often found difficult to care for. Some people viewed her as a bad mother, which may have influenced the initial reaction to Ashley's disappearance. Investigators initially assumed Ashley might have run away from her troubled home. However, many people who know Ashley do not believe that she would do that. At 12 years old, she is too young to make such a bold decision. Despite this, detectives did not treat the case as urgent. It was only after a week had passed that they began to suspect something serious had happened to Ashley. At that point, they started working on the theory that she had been kidnapped. Police reached out to her classmates, and, confirming their worst fears, they learned that she had neither been at school nor made it to the bus stop on the day she vanished. Over the following days, police searched the area around her apartment complex, utilizing trained dogs. Neighbors were questioned to gather any clues about her disappearance. Search teams, including community volunteers, were assembled, and detectives reviewed a list of approximately 90 local individuals with histories of abuse offenses. They also investigated suspicious residents known to have mental health issues and closely examined Ashley's online activity. Despite these efforts, no significant leads were uncovered. Complicating the matter is the fact that locals began reporting sightings of Ashley after she went missing. These claims were thoroughly investigated and dismissed as false. After a week of fruitless searching, authorities recognized the need for outside expertise. On January 18, 2002, 9 days after Ashley went missing, the police sought assistance from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. By this stage, investigators feared Ashley might not be found alive. The FBI immediately recognized the complexity of the case. There was no physical evidence, no witnesses, and no clear suspects. Ashley had seemingly vanished without a trace. A dedicated task force was formed to expand the scope of the investigation beyond the local area. Thousands of flyers featuring Ashley's photo were distributed, while law enforcement continued interviewing teachers, neighbors, and relatives to gather any potentially useful information. These efforts successfully raised public awareness, generating new tips from the community. Unfortunately, many of these tips ultimately led investigators down several dead ends. During the investigation into Ashley's relatives, detectives uncovered a disturbing incident involving her biological father. A year before her disappearance, her father had been charged with abusing her. For 3 years prior to the charges, he had been abusing her. Initially, Ashley did not even know her biological father, as she believed her stepfather, who lived with her mother, was her real dad. However, after her mother ended her relationship with the stepfather, she discovered the truth and decided to meet her biological father. Upon reconnecting with him, he took advantage of the situation and began abusing her. She visited him on weekends, but each time she returned home, she was visibly distressed. After enduring these visits for 3 years, she finally refused to meet him. Eventually, she confided in her mother, revealing what had been happening. Her mother immediately reported the abuse to the police. The case never went to trial because her father accepted a plea deal, which resulted in 10 years of probation. Investigators also considered him a suspect in Ashley's disappearance, but he was later ruled out after providing a solid alibi. Since April 2001, police have been called to Ashley's home several times for domestic conflicts and disputes. As the problems in her household escalated, she began spending more time at a neighboring house. Her classmate, 13-year-old Miranda Gaddis, lived there with her family. The two girls became close friends, attending the same school and frequently sleeping over at each other's homes. In August 1997, a man named Ward Weaver moved into a rented house on South Beaver Creek Street in Oregon City. His 12-year-old daughter, Mallory, became friends with Ashley and Miranda. All 3 girls were students at Gardner Middle School and attended the same dance class. Mallory's father, Ward, often drove them to school in the mornings. He is a 39-year-old man with a criminal record. He had previously served 3 years in prison for assaulting a nanny's child with a piece of concrete, and both of his ex-wives had accused him of domestic violence. At one point, one of Ashley's teachers noticed an alarming interaction. Ward kissed Ashley on the lips after giving her a ride. Concerned, the teacher reported the incident to the school principal. However, the matter was dismissed after the explanation that Ward likely viewed Ashley as a daughter and that the gesture was innocent. Over the summer of 2001, Ashley began spending even more time at Ward's house, sometimes staying there for extended periods. She even joined the Ward family on a 2-week trip to California. Upon returning from the trip, she confided to friends and teachers that Ward had harassed her. However, he denied the accusations, claiming that Ashley was lying and trying to defame him. He stated that he no longer wanted her in his home. Despite her allegations, no charges were filed against Ward. During the investigation, witnesses reported multiple instances of Ward behaving inappropriately toward Ashley. His daughter, Mallory, said there were times when he wouldn't let Ashley leave the house even if she wanted to. Despite these reports, authorities claimed there wasn't enough evidence to take action against him. Although Child Services received reports about the situation, Ashley refused to follow through with the complaints, making further legal action nearly impossible. After Ashley was eventually prohibited from visiting Ward's house, her emotional well-being, behavior, and school performance improved significantly. However, a few months later, she began visiting Ward's house again to spend time with her friend Mallory. By late December 2001, Ward's wife, frustrated with the circumstances, decided to leave their home. Less than 2 weeks after her departure, Ashley disappeared unexpectedly. Her sudden disappearance immediately raised suspicions. Ashley's close friend and classmate, Miranda, was a lively and outgoing girl who had spent most of her life in Oregon City with her family. From a young age, Miranda was considered attractive and dreamed of becoming a model. However, like Ashley, she faced significant challenges growing up. She had been abused as a child. Her biological father, although he never directly harmed her, had a criminal history involving the abuse of minors. Following their divorce, Miranda's mother entered a relationship with a new partner who faced numerous difficulties, such as coming from a marginalized background, having only a 9th grade education, and being illiterate. Tragically, this man was accused of abusing Miranda and 2 other girls. She bravely reported the abuse to authorities, leading to legal action in 1999. When Ashley went missing, Miranda became a key source of information. She showed immense courage by informing the police about the suspected abuse Ashley had endured, although her account was insufficient to clarify what had happened to her friend. Miranda and Ashley often confided in each other, sharing personal stories about their experiences with the Ward household and Miranda's biological father. Investigators suspected a connection between Ashley's disappearance and the allegations involving Ward. However, no solid evidence supported this theory. Meanwhile, rumors began to circulate that he had abused her. This led to the bullying and harassment of his daughter, Mallory, at school, deterring her from attending. Ward, angered by the accusations, denied the rumors. However, his ex-wife provided police with critical details, describing him as aggressive and difficult to handle. On March 8, 2002, 2 months after Ashley's disappearance, tragedy struck again when 13-year-old Miranda vanished. That morning, she said goodbye to her mother around 8 a.m. as her mother left for work. She planned to take the school bus, which arrived at 8:20 a.m., but she never made it to the bus stop. Her disappearance shocked the community. Just months earlier, Miranda had appeared on a TV broadcast discussing Ashley's case, pleading for her friend's safe return. Now, she had also disappeared. Family members clung to the hope that both girls were still alive and would come home safely. Miranda's case bore striking similarities to Ashley's. She was supposed to walk to the bus stop, but no one saw her on her way there, on the bus, or at school. By evening, her mother, panicked, contacted teachers, classmates, and the police. Detectives quickly noticed troubling parallels between the 2 cases. Both Ashley and Miranda were the same age, had similar physical features, and shared common interests, such as attending school dances. Miranda's mother insisted her daughter would never willingly talk to a stranger or run away. Known for being strong-willed, she was believed to have resisted an abduction unless the perpetrator was someone she knew. The disappearance of Miranda plunged the community into chaos. Residents demanded action, and the police were flooded with calls urging them to find the person responsible. Fear spread across the town as people began to feel unsafe, realizing a potential predator might be at large. In response, police formed a special task force and assigned 2 teams of investigators to the case. By March 15, officers were actively following leads. However, it was revealed that a significant number of potential suspects were initially overlooked. Many individuals who temporarily or semi-permanently lived in the apartment complex where Ashley and Miranda resided were unknown to the landlords. Investigators identified 150 such people, some of whom were registered criminals. Authorities also conducted more thorough checks on local offenders with histories of abuse, about 900 in total, analyzing their possible connections to the disappearances. As weeks passed, one name repeatedly surfaced: Ward. His wife claimed that Miranda had angered him by warning local girls to steer clear of him due to his behavior. She suggested this might have been a motive for him to harm her. What is suspicious is that he gave a television interview in which he dismissed the cases, claiming that Ashley and Miranda simply ran away. Despite his questionable behavior, investigators consistently ruled him out because no evidence or witnesses directly linked him to Ashley and Miranda's disappearances. The property surrounding Ward's house had already been inspected by a dog handler and a specially trained dog. Later, an independent investigator requested permission to conduct a further investigation. Permission was granted by the homeowner, but the owner specifically asked the investigator to avoid a concrete slab that had been poured in a distant section of the property. Importantly, when the dog trainer brought the dog near the area, the dog indicated that there might be a body buried nearby. This information was submitted to the city police department in a report. However, since the dog handler was independent, further verification was required. Upon reviewing records, detectives discovered that Ward's father had a history of violent crime. He had buried one of his victims under a concrete slab in his yard. Despite this revelation, detectives did not launch a large-scale search of the property. Months have passed since Ashley went missing, and there are still no clues as to her whereabouts. Many began to fear that the mystery of the two missing friends, Ashley and Miranda, would never be solved. Throughout this period, Ward consistently refused to provide any information. Unexpectedly, on June 30th, Ward agreed to speak with the media. He stated that he had no knowledge of what had happened to Ashley and Miranda, but admitted that he had become the primary suspect. The FBI identified several reasons for this. First, Ashley had previously accused Ward of molesting her. Second, he failed a polygraph test. Additionally, during questioning, he revealed that his father was on death row in California for murdering a girl and her boyfriend. Ward also shared details about his troubled childhood, stating that his father abandoned him at the age of 4 and subjected him to severe abuse. When Ward grew up, he reportedly directed his anger toward his younger siblings. Detectives suspected that he might have followed in his father's criminal footsteps. His media interview led investigators to reevaluate the evidence, reinforcing suspicions of his involvement in both disappearances. This prompted public outrage, with many questioning why Ward had not yet been arrested. Despite the failed polygraph test, the motives, and various suspicious circumstances, detectives felt they lacked enough evidence to charge Ward. Others had also failed polygraph tests, and Ward had allowed police to search his property multiple times, appearing cooperative. These factors contributed to the lack of action against him. By midsummer of 2002, police investigators were still hard at work, examining over 1,200 men for potential links. However, the case ultimately reached a standstill. The FBI announced a $50,000 reward for any information that could aid their investigation. The city administration contributed $10,000, and the owners of the residential complex where Ashley and Miranda lived added another $5,000. Despite these efforts, the search did not progress. Agents repeatedly appeared on television, urging citizens to report suspicious activity and highlighting the possibility that the girls might still be alive. However, these appeals yielded no significant leads. The breakthrough occurred on August 15, 2002. Meanwhile, Ward, who had been planning to leave town since early summer, packed his belongings and asked his son's 19-year-old girlfriend to help him move. After she helped carry his bags into his new home, he attacked her. He dragged her into the shower, forcibly removed her clothing, and abused her. He then attempted to strangle her, but she managed to escape. Wrapped only in a curtain, she fled the house. Realizing his plan had failed, Ward quickly packed his belongings and fled in his car. Terrified and aware of what had happened, his son, Francis, immediately called the police. Authorities stopped Ward before he could leave the city. He was arrested and charged with first-degree abuse. Due to concerns that he might flee if released, bail was set at $1 million. A week after the arrest, a significant breakthrough occurred. Francis, Ward's 24-year-old son, went to the police station and revealed that his father had confided in him before fleeing. Ward admitted to having done bad things and expressed a desire to escape. Francis suspected this was related to Ashley and Miranda but wasn't entirely certain. Following Francis's statement, authorities determined they had sufficient evidence to obtain search warrants and conduct an extensive investigation of Ward's home and the surrounding property. On August 23, 2002, a judge authorized a search warrant for the Ward property. Police sealed off the area and began a meticulous search, which was expected to take several days. On Saturday, August 24, law enforcement discovered a cardboard box containing human remains in a shed behind the house. Due to the condition of the remains, it was unclear how long they had been there, and identification would take additional time. Meanwhile, approximately 40 FBI and state police agents continued to examine the property. During the search, investigators determined that special construction equipment was necessary to excavate a concrete slab that appeared to have been poured after Ashley's disappearance. The following day, beneath the slab, they uncovered a barrel containing another set of human remains. Upon hearing this development, Ward's ex-wife expressed her outrage. She asserted that she had been convinced from the beginning that Ward was responsible for Ashley's death. Months before Ward's arrest, she had contacted the FBI, urging them to investigate him more thoroughly. She expressed fury that the delay in taking action may have allowed another victim, Miranda, to be killed. Authorities now believe that both Ashley's and Miranda's remains had been discovered on Ward's property. Ward's ex-wife also pointed out suspicious circumstances surrounding the concrete slab. She explained that the slab had been poured hastily in the middle of the night, immediately after Ashley's disappearance, which seemed unusual. Ward had claimed he planned to install a jacuzzi on the slab, but the jacuzzi never materialized. He never offered an explanation for the urgency of the construction. Within days, the remains that were found were identified as those of Miranda, Ashley's missing friend. The barrel contained Ashley's body. The hopes of their loved ones for their safe return were shattered instantly. Charges, including murder with aggravating circumstances, abuse, and second-degree abuse of a corpse, were filed against Ward in the weeks that followed. These charges were added to an existing case related to the abuse of his son's girlfriend. It also came to light that Ward might be linked to another abuse case dating back to July 2002. Prosecutors argued that the death penalty was warranted in this case. After analyzing the remains, investigators determined that both Ashley and Miranda had endured brutal violence, though the exact cause of death could not be established. Beatings, gunshot wounds, stabbing, poisoning, and strangulation were all ruled out. Ashley's body, mummified and frozen in a fetal-like position, was found fully clothed. A white rope had been tied in a specific manner around her arms, legs, and neck, resembling the position in which Miranda's body was discovered. Both bodies were wrapped in multiple layers of plastic and tightly bound. Investigators speculated that Ashley and Miranda had been kept in a freezer at the house for an extended period. Ward's fingerprints were found on the materials used to conceal their bodies. A toxicology report revealed that Ashley had a high level of alcohol in her system, equivalent to consuming 5 servings of whiskey or similar liquor shortly before her death. Miranda's body contained a lower concentration of alcohol. However, the exact amounts consumed remained unclear, as decomposition naturally produces alcohol over time. Ashley might have lost consciousness due to drinking, and it was believed that Ward had forced her to consume alcohol. It was later revealed that, just before Ashley's disappearance, Ward had attempted to get both Mallory's daughter and her friends Ashley and Miranda drunk. While the exact cause of Ashley's death could not be determined, the task force had to examine several possibilities to present in court. These included alcohol poisoning, suffocation, using a pillow, hand, or a technique that cut off blood flow to the brain, asphyxiation, confinement in a sealed container, or the use of rare illegal substances or poisons that were difficult to detect in toxicology tests. Following Ward's arrest, he continued to speak to reporters, proclaiming his innocence. He presented autopsy reports to support his claims, arguing that since prosecutors could not identify the exact cause of Ashley's and Miranda's deaths, they would not be able to prove his guilt. He also suggested that someone else might have buried the bodies on his property to frame him. However, the prosecution had substantial evidence against him, including accusations of abuse, Ashley's previous statement about harassment, testimony from other victims, and circumstantial evidence. Key pieces of evidence included Ward's fingerprints on the ropes and bags used to bind the bodies. Furthermore, prosecutors pointed out that Ward's father had been on death row for committing a similar crime. When the judge became aware of Ward's interactions with the media, a gag order was issued to ensure a fair trial. Despite this, Ward contacted a reporter, claiming that the judge could not stop him from exercising his free speech, a statement some interpreted as defiance. On April 22, 2004, shortly before the trial, Ward's lawyer submitted evidence suggesting that he had been mentally unstable at the time of his arrest. Ward had carved his daughter's name into his arm, inflicted injuries on his chest, and repeatedly banged his head during altercations. He maintained that he was being imprisoned simply for disciplining his daughter. A defense psychiatrist diagnosed him with severe depression and narcissistic personality disorder. However, the prosecution's psychiatrist argued that Ward was exaggerating his symptoms. Ward's erratic behavior in jail eventually led to his placement in solitary confinement. He was prescribed high doses of antidepressants and, due to his mental state, was transferred to a psychiatric hospital. The trial was temporarily suspended while professionals evaluated whether Ward was feigning his symptoms. By late summer of 2004, psychiatrists deemed him mentally competent to stand trial for murder and other charges. Fearing a death penalty conviction, Ward's lawyer negotiated a plea bargain with the prosecution, a choice supported by Ashley's and Miranda's families. On September 22, Ward pleaded guilty to 7 of the 17 charges against him, including murder with aggravating circumstances, abuse, and abuse of a body. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. As part of the plea agreement, the death penalty was dropped. After the sentencing, Ward's son Francie expressed relief, stating that he was grateful his father would never harm anyone or destroy lives again. However, Ward refused to disclose where and how Ashley and Miranda had died, leaving their families desperate for answers. In 2009, Miranda's younger sister visited Ward in prison twice in hopes of obtaining the truth. She believed this was the only way to find closure and peace. During the second visit, Ward admitted to killing both girls, describing how he had strangled them with his bare hands and buried their bodies on his property. Disturbingly, he boasted about successfully hiding their remains to avoid detection by authorities. Shockingly, he told Miranda's sister that if she had been older at the time, he would have likely killed her too. Ward was incarcerated at the East Oregon Correctional Facility, along with 4 other inmates. This section of the prison is specifically designated for individuals convicted of severe crimes, with inmates kept isolated from one another for safety reasons. Despite these precautions, the measures proved insufficient. On March 4, 2007, an inmate working as a barber attacked Ward. Inmate barbers in correctional facilities are required to use electric razors for safety, but he wielded a homemade razor and stabbed Ward in the neck. Security intervened, apprehending him and saving Ward's life. The exact motive for the attack remains unclear, though it is believed to be connected to Ward's criminal history. On February 14, 2014, Ward's son, Francis Weaver, who was 31 years old at the time, was arrested and later convicted of murdering prohibited substance dealers in Canby, Oregon. He was sentenced to life in prison. This crime marked yet another act of violence linked to the Weaver family, making it the 3rd consecutive generation of men in the family associated with murder. In 2019, following an executive order from California's governor imposing a moratorium on the death penalty, Ward had his death sentence commuted to life imprisonment and was transferred to the general prison population. Brenda Michaela Gordillo was born on May 16, 1995, in Catamarca, Argentina. She is the only girl in a family of 3 children, with 2 older brothers, Yvonne and Federico. She also shared an especially close bond with her mother, Florin. She was a bright, organized, and responsible student, known for her friendly personality and ability to mediate conflicts. This aptitude eventually inspired her to pursue a career in psychology. As a child, Brenda participated in activities such as gymnastics, dancing, and acting in school plays, thoroughly enjoying her time on stage. She built many friendships and was well-liked for her helpful advice and understanding. After high school, she was accepted into a prestigious university in Buenos Aires, where she studied psychology with a specialization in negotiation and conflict resolution. A standout student, she consistently earned praise from her professors, who envisioned a bright future for her. She had plans to stay in the capital and build her career there. However, her life took an unexpected turn. During her second-to-last year of college, Brenda received heartbreaking news. Her father had passed away suddenly from a heart attack. The loss deeply affected her family, particularly her mother, who was left alone in their family home. By that time, Brenda's brothers had moved out and started their own families, while she remained in Buenos Aires, completing her degree. After graduating, Brenda returned to Catamarca to live with and support her mother. She found a job and decided to further her education by enrolling in law school at a local university. Returning to student life, she formed new friendships, one of which was with a young man named Naim Vera. Naim was born on June 11, 1999 in Catamarca, into a prestigious and wealthy family with a tradition of practicing medicine. His father was a renowned cardiac surgeon, and his mother ran a private pediatric practice. As the younger of two sons, Naeem grew up alongside his brother Jamie, who was his complete opposite. While their parents provided the best possible opportunities for both, Jamie was hardworking and aspired to follow the family tradition by becoming a doctor. Naeem, on the other hand, was far more relaxed, self-indulgent, and entitled. Naeem impresses with his handsome appearance, modern fashion style, exuding confidence and receiving much love. Many girls at school admired him, and he thrived on the attention. However, in his final years of high school, he began using banned substances and often got into trouble. Thanks to his family's influence, he always avoided serious consequences. Over time, Naeem developed a reputation for being arrogant and confrontational. He was a bully, quarrelsome, and prone to violent outbursts. Despite his privileged upbringing, his volatile nature often overshadowed his advantages. In 2018, after graduating from high school, Naeem decided to turn his life around. He left behind his reckless behavior, sought treatment for his substance issues, and later gained acceptance into law school. It was during this new chapter of his life that he met Brenda. He was immediately captivated by her, and she was equally drawn to his confidence and bold demeanor. At the time, Brenda was 23, while Naeem had just turned 19. The age difference did not bother her, and she embraced his attention. When Brenda and Naeem first met, they spent hours talking at a bar. Later that night, they went to an apartment owned by Naeem's parents, to which he had access. That evening marked the beginning of their intimate relationship, and from then on, they began seeing each other frequently. For the first time, Brenda experienced what she believed to be true love and radiated happiness. Her friends and family noticed this transformation, often commenting on how joyful she had become. However, none of them had ever met Naeem, about whom Brenda talked a lot. Although she frequently mentioned Naeem, she only shared his photos from social media with her mother and brothers, casually hinting that he was her future fiancé. Over time, it became obvious that Naeem had no plans to introduce Brenda to his family or friends. Their relationship remained confined to the same apartment, and they never appeared in public together as a couple. Brenda thought it was unusual but convinced herself that Naeem just needed more time. Privately, she also worried that their age difference made him hesitant. The secret meetings lasted for many months, and she still invested a lot of emotions in this relationship. Even when Naeem began to grow distant, she chose to ignore the change in his behavior, clinging to the belief that their connection was still strong. One day, Brenda received a call from an unfamiliar number. The caller identifies himself as Naeem's cousin and gives her a dire warning. He claimed that Naeem had a violent past and that, if not for the protection of his parents, Naeem would have already faced significant legal trouble for his actions. The caller advises her to end the relationship immediately before things get worse. However, she ignores his advice. In mid-February 2019, Brenda found out she was pregnant. The news took her by surprise, but after the initial shock, she felt genuinely happy. She sees this as an opportunity to improve her relationship with Naeem, hoping that this will make him more serious and willing to commit to her. When they met again, Brenda shared the news. At first, Naeem was silent, but his reaction quickly shifted to anger. He stated that he wasn't ready to become a father and insisted that having a child didn't align with his current plans. He urged Brenda to terminate the pregnancy, promising to cover all expenses. Brenda firmly refused, explaining that she had health issues and that being able to conceive was nothing short of a miracle. Their disagreement escalated, and Naeem ended the relationship, saying it was best for them to separate. For a time, they stopped seeing each other but continued exchanging messages on social media. During this period, Brenda confided in a close friend, admitting how much she missed him and expressing hope for reconciliation. She revealed that she had never loved anyone as deeply as she loved Naeem. Towards the end of February, Naeem called Brenda and proposed they meet to have a calm discussion. Brenda was thrilled, convinced that he had reconsidered. She excitedly shared the news with her best friend, who encouraged her and reassured her that everything would work out. They planned to meet on the night of February 28, 2019. That night, she was invited to a classmate's birthday party. After the party, she went to Naeem's apartment and never left again. The following day, Friday, March 1st, Brenda did not attend her university classes, which was highly out of character for her. She had never missed a lecture without a valid reason, and now no one could contact her or determine her whereabouts. Brenda's mother remembered her mentioning the birthday party and saying in advance that she wouldn't be home that night. However, she did not specify whether she would be with friends or her boyfriend. She had planned to go directly to class in the morning, so her mother wasn't initially concerned. It wasn't until later that afternoon, when the university contacted Brenda's family to ask about her absence, that her mother realized something was wrong. Friends and relatives quickly began searching for her. Everyone knew that she wouldn't just vanish without informing someone. At first, there was still hope. Perhaps she was simply spending time with Naeem and had lost track of time. But as relatives began calling around for information, something shocking occurred that changed everything. In that moment, all hope was lost. Brenda was gone forever. At this time, Naeem entered the Catamarca police station, accompanied by his father and 2 attorneys. He stated that he wished to confess to a tragic incident that had occurred the previous night. He was taken to an interrogation room, where he calmly recounted his version of the events. Although visibly distressed, he remained composed and spoke confidently. Naeem explained that he had arranged for a female acquaintance, Brenda, to visit his apartment that evening for an intimate encounter. He mentioned that they had met in this way before, without any commitments or expectations. However, that night, an argument broke out between them, leading Naeem to demand that she leave immediately. The apartment consisted of 2 levels connected by a staircase, and Naeem claimed that during the confrontation, Brenda stepped backward, lost her balance, and fell down the stairs. He stated that he tried to catch her but failed. When he reached her, she was unresponsive. He said he attempted to help her, but it was too late. She had sustained a fatal neck injury from the fall. Panicked and fearing he would be blamed, Naeem made a rash decision to dispose of the body. He dragged Brenda to the terrace, where a large outdoor grill was located. Finding lighter fluid in a cabinet, he poured it over her body and lit a match. The fire ignited immediately, but the flames grew uncontrollably high, producing thick smoke. At this point, a neighbor from a nearby apartment noticed the activity and saw someone grilling late at night. When Naeem saw the neighbor, he waved and smiled, appearing calm and friendly. Later, the neighbor testified in court that Naeem's demeanor seemed normal, so he didn't report anything suspicious. Realizing that the grill couldn't be used to completely destroy the remains, Naeem abandoned the idea and brought the body back inside. He then packed the remains into garbage bags, placed them in boxes, and loaded them into his car. Driving aimlessly, he decided to discard the lower half in a random dumpster he passed. For the upper half, he drove out of the city to a shallow ravine near the roadway. He threw the remains into the ditch, covering them with dirt, branches, and trash. As he headed back to his car, a passing patrol unit stopped to check why his car was parked by the roadside. Thinking quickly, Naeem lied, saying that his girlfriend had called him and he had pulled over to talk. The officers believed him and left. Returning to his apartment, Naeem attempted to clean up but found the task overwhelming. In distress, he called his cousin and confessed everything over the phone. Initially, his cousin believed he was hallucinating or under the influence of a banned substance, but the seriousness of the situation soon became clear. The cousin contacted Naeem's father, who, with the help of attorneys, insisted that Naeem turn himself in to the authorities, hoping it would reduce his sentence. During his confession, Naeem disclosed the locations where he had disposed of the remains. Additionally, security camera footage showed him discarding garbage bags into a dumpster, with his car visible in the background. Even if he had tried to deny it, the evidence against him was irrefutable. Investigators quickly found the second box in the ravine, prompting forensic experts to examine the remains. Their analysis revealed a shocking truth that completely contradicted Naeem's account. Although the body had been severely burned, there were no injuries consistent with falling down the stairs, no broken bones, no significant bruising, and, most notably, Brenda's neck was unbroken. Instead, the autopsy revealed a far more sinister cause of death. The cartilage in Brenda's throat had been crushed, not accidentally but by forceful pressure from bare hands. Her official cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation. She had been strangled. The horror didn't end there. Forensic experts found fabric fibers inside Brenda's mouth, later determined to be from her own scarf. This indicates that it had been forced into her mouth to silence her before the strangulation. Additionally, fresh scratches on Naeem's hand suggested that Brenda had fought back fiercely. The evidence made one thing clear: this was a calculated and deliberate act of violence, not an accident. When Brenda's family and friends were informed of the tragedy, a new detail emerged: her alleged pregnancy, which Naeem had never mentioned. Under questioning, he admitted that Brenda had been pressuring him for weeks, using the pregnancy to influence him. He explained that their relationship had been entirely physical, not romantic, and that there had been no discussions about a future together or starting a family. He claimed that when Brenda revealed she was pregnant, he immediately offered to pay for an abortion, but she refused. This disagreement had sparked several heated arguments. On the night of the incident, Brenda allegedly not only insisted on keeping the baby but also demanded that Naeem marry her. According to Naeem, her demands infuriated him and, in a fit of rage, he ended her life. However, there was a major flaw in Naeem's story. An autopsy revealed that Brenda was not pregnant. If she had used the pregnancy as leverage, it was an empty claim. Investigators uncovered an even more shocking truth: Brenda had a medical condition that made pregnancy impossible, a fact she had known since her teenage years. So why had she told Naeem she was pregnant? One of Brenda's closest friends explained during questioning that Brenda genuinely believed she was pregnant. She had missed her period, experienced symptoms, and was overjoyed, thinking doctors had been wrong about her condition. When she shared the news with Naeem, he dismissed her claim and cut ties with her. Brenda confided in only 2 close friends about the pregnancy, never saw a doctor to confirm it, and didn't tell her mother. According to her closest friend, she had no intention of manipulating Naeem. She truly believed she was going to be a mother and had started imagining a future with him. Naeem was arrested the same day he turned himself in and shared his version of events. He claimed what happened was an accident. According to him, he panicked and, in his shock, made the horrific decision to dispose of Brenda's body in a brutal way. He also insisted that their connection was purely casual, with no emotional commitment or real relationship. In Argentina, crimes within romantic or domestic relationships are classified as aggravated offenses due to the victim's vulnerable position. Victims typically trust their partner, do not perceive them as a threat, and may have a diminished sense of self-preservation. If the court ruled that Brenda and Naeem had a real relationship, he could face life in prison. However, if he convinced the court it was merely a casual arrangement with no emotional ties, his sentence might be reduced to a maximum of 15 years. Naeem and his legal team, hired by his father, focused on proving this. Naeem's lawyers argued that he and Brenda were never seen together in public, had no shared photos, and had not introduced each other to their families or friends. However, Brenda's family and friends described a different reality. They insisted that Brenda was deeply in love with Naeem and believed he felt the same. She avoided pressuring him or pushing for formal introductions to his family, assuming he simply needed time. One of Naeem's classmates later disclosed that Naeem had never taken Brenda seriously. He enjoyed spending time with her but had been leading her on, giving her false hope. When Brenda told him she was pregnant, he reportedly panicked and became desperate to find a way out. The classmate claimed Naeem had said the baby would never be born or he would end his life. At the time, nobody thought much of his words. However, about a week before the crime, Naeem allegedly approached his cousin, asking if he knew someone who could solve a problem in exchange for money. His cousin dismissed it as a joke and didn't take it seriously. It wasn't until the night of the crime, when Naeem called asking for help to cover up what he had done, that his cousin realized the gravity of the situation. After the tragedy, Naeem's family publicly expressed their condolences to Brenda's loved ones, stating that her loss had devastated their own lives as well. Despite this, his legal team worked to minimize his responsibility, alleging that Brenda had been manipulating and pressuring him. They even accused her of faking the pregnancy to trap him into marriage, claiming she had ulterior motives and saw Naeem as a wealthy and promising husband. Naeem also tried to argue that he acted in a moment of extreme distress, but his defense quickly crumbled. During his first interrogation, he provided detailed descriptions of how he disposed of Brenda's remains, details that were inconsistent with someone allegedly in shock. Additionally, a neighbor's testimony proved damning. The neighbor recounted seeing Naeem grilling on the terrace that night and noted that he appeared calm and composed. The neighbor even remembered Naeem waving hello in a friendly manner, as if everything were normal. The psychiatric evaluation concluded that Naeem was fully aware of his actions at the time of the crime and could be held legally responsible. However, specialists diagnosed him with psychopathic traits, borderline personality disorder, and bipolar affective disorder. Despite these diagnoses, none diminished his legal accountability. Naeem's family was wealthy and well-connected, which could have enabled him to avoid full responsibility. His legal team deliberately delayed the trial, hoping public interest would eventually wane. Brenda's family feared that Naeem might receive a light sentence or even evade justice entirely. Determined to prevent this, Brenda's mother took action. She organized numerous protests and marches, demanding justice for her daughter. Feminist activists also joined the effort, ensuring the case remained in the public spotlight. The trial began in May 2021 and attracted widespread media attention. A key focus of the proceedings was defining the relationship between Naeem and Brenda. His defense attorneys argued that, given his young age, he was not ready for a serious commitment and that his relationship with Brenda was nothing more than a casual fling. If the defense managed to convince the court, Naeem could have received a lighter sentence. Additionally, they sought to prove that the crime was not premeditated, which could have made him eligible for parole within 5 to 7 years. During the trial, Naeem remained cold and detached, showing no remorse for his actions. Following his attorney's advice, he apologized formally to Brenda's family, but his apology came across as insincere and even mocking. On May 14, 2021, Naeem was convicted of aggravated homicide and attempting to conceal the crime. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole and was also ordered to pay Brenda's family 3 million pesos in moral damages. Naeem refused to make a final statement and listened to the verdict with an indifferent expression, as if it did not affect him. Immediately after the sentencing, his attorneys announced their intention to file an appeal. As the legal team prepared for the appeal, looking for new witnesses and evidence to support Naeem's innocence, the media uncovered incidents from his past that his parents had previously concealed. 2 former classmates accused Naeem of harassment and aggressive behavior. Both women agreed to testify, describing him as a dangerous individual who could not handle rejection. While he was often pursued by girls, on the occasions when someone rejected his advances, he responded by stalking, threatening, and trying to humiliate them. One classmate described how she had to transfer schools after Naeem tried to force himself on her. When she resisted, he retaliated by spreading malicious rumors and leaking private photos of her online. At the time, his father's legal team had managed to suppress these incidents. In March 2022, a retrial was held for Brenda's case. With the new testimonies considered, the court upheld its original ruling. Naeem Vera was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 51 years.
On December 5, 1975, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, a married couple was on their way home from a school basketball game. At around 8:30 p.m., the wife decided to visit her niece, Lindy, who lived nearby. They parked their car near the apartment complex, and she got out to quickly check on her niece, leaving her husband in the car. However, when she reached the apartment, she discovered that the front door was unlocked. Cautiously peering inside, she saw a knocked-over floor lamp and other items scattered around. The disarray of the apartment indicated that a fight had occurred. When she noticed strange stains on the floor resembling blood, she stepped into the living room. What she discovered would haunt her forever. In the center of the room lay Lindy, with a knife stabbed into her throat. Overwhelmed with panic, she ran out of the house and hurried to her car to call the police. The police arrived at the scene and were baffled about who could have had a conflict with the young 19-year-old girl, who had recently gotten married. They wondered what could have led to her brutal murder. Lindy Sue Beekler was born on January 31, 1956. Her parents divorced when she was very young. She was raised by her mother. Her father moved to the suburbs, remarried, and had a son with his new wife, making him Lindy's half-brother. From a young age, Lindy was curious and cheerful. She loved exploring new activities. Lindy participated in the Girl Scouts, went hiking, enjoyed boating, and joined different clubs. Lindy was a positive person who made everyone feel good. Her bright smile encouraged others to smile too. Above all, she treasured her family. One of her favorite things to do was curl up on the couch with her mother. In those moments, she felt like the happiest person alive because her mother was not only a caring parent, but also her best friend. Recently, Lindy had been employed at a flower shop, where her boss and co-workers described her as very hardworking, humble, and somewhat shy. However, once they got to know her better, Lindy revealed her fun side. She had a great sense of humor. Despite this, she preferred not to be the center of attention. Lindy married at a young age despite her insecurities. Her husband, Philip Beekler, was 5 years older than her. They first met when Lindy was visiting her sister. They were instantly attracted to each other. On October 19th, the year before the attack, Lindy and Philip tied the knot. The ceremony was officiated by Philip's grandfather, who blessed their union, saying they were perfect for one another. Philip worked part-time as an agent at a car rental company while studying art at Millersville State College. It appeared he was inspired by his parents. His mother owned an art gallery and was deeply passionate about art. Lindy is just 2 months away from turning 20 and has recently begun to embrace adult life as a married woman. Philip and Lindy were happily living together in their small one-bedroom apartment. However, Lindy felt uneasy being home alone. She never felt safe since they moved in. She constantly sensed that someone was watching her through the sliding glass door. Though she couldn't pinpoint anyone specific, overall, she was simply afraid to be alone in the apartment. In January, they planned to move to a new place in Manor Township. In the evenings, Lindy got home from work a couple of hours before her husband. She would lock the doors and turn on all the lights, carefully listening to every noise. During the investigation of the crime scene, the police found that Lindy had been stabbed 19 times. The attack involved 2 different knives. One knife, which the attacker had brought, was never found, while the other knife came from Lindy's kitchen. This kitchen knife was still in her neck when her aunt discovered her. Lindy's body showed 11 stab wounds to her chest and upper abdomen, 5 to her back, and 3 to her neck. One of the stabs had pierced the carotid artery, causing her to bleed to death. Experts noted that Lindy had defensive wounds on her hands, suggesting she fought fiercely for her life until the very end. The apartment was in chaos, with blood everywhere. It appeared that, after finishing her shift at the flower shop, Lindy had stopped to buy groceries, as bags of food were left on the kitchen table, still unpacked. This indicates that the attack occurred right after she returned home. Several pieces of evidence were collected at the crime scene. A shoe print, likely size 10 or 11, was discovered on the kitchen floor. This print suggested that the attacker was likely a large, strong man. Another piece of evidence hinted at a possible motive, although Lindy was fully clothed when found. Detectives suspected she had been abused. Male fluid was discovered on her underwear, which could provide the perpetrator's DNA. However, in 1975, forensic capabilities were limited. Experts could only identify the attacker's blood type and compare it with that of a suspect, but they needed to identify a suspect first. Unfortunately, that was where the evidence trail ended. The police also lacked the perpetrator's fingerprints, as the knife handle found in Lindy's throat was wrapped in a kitchen towel. The news of Lindy's tragic death devastated her family. Relatives called Philip at work, telling him he needed to come home immediately because something had happened to Lindy. As he rushed to their apartment, he feared the worst, but he could never have imagined that his beloved wife had been brutally killed. The police did not allow Philip inside the apartment, leaving him confused about what had happened. They kept him in the hallway until he found out the heartbreaking news that Lindy was dead. Seeing how pale he became, medics gave him a sedative, and the police took him to his mother's house. For about 4 days, Philip felt lost. He couldn't tell whether it was day or night or how much time had passed since the tragedy. He had to sit and wait for answers while the police continued their investigation. Detectives interviewed her co-workers and employer, and none of them noticed anything unusual about her behavior. Lindy went to work at the flower shop in a good mood. That day, she did not appear anxious or scared. There were no dissatisfied customers. Everything was completely normal. Lindy excitedly shared with her colleagues about the Christmas gift she had prepared for her husband. That evening, she calmly got into her car, waved goodbye to her colleagues, and drove home. Unbeknownst to anyone, it would be her last evening alive. Around 5:30 p.m. After work, Lindy went to the car dealership where her husband, Philip, worked to pick up his paycheck. She cashed the check at the bank and then went to a nearby grocery store to buy groceries, filling 4 bags. Afterward, she headed home, parked her car, and began unloading the bags. It seemed likely she would need to make 2 trips. At that moment, someone likely entered her apartment and attacked her. Detectives speculated on this since there were no signs of forced entry, and Lindy was not the kind of person to let a stranger into her home. This led the police to believe that Lindy knew her attacker, felt safe being alone with them. The first person the detectives looked at as a suspect was the victim's husband, Philip. However, the family and friends insisting that Philip and Lindy were a happy couple. Philip deeply loved Lindy and felt incredibly lucky to be dating her. Amazed that someone so beautiful would be interested in him, he said she changed his life for the better by inspiring him to enroll in college and pursue painting. In return, he supported her dream of opening a flower shop. When Lindy was killed, it devastated Philip. He couldn't bear to stay in their apartment, where every corner reminded him of her, so he moved out. Although he had a strong alibi, investigators were slow to clear him as a suspect. Following Lindy's death, Philip felt lost. He wandered the streets for hours, dropped out of college. They had dreamt of finishing their studies, starting a family, and planning their future together. Now, in an instant, all their dreams collapsed, like a sandcastle washed away by the tide. Philip had to completely rebuild his life in light of this tragic reality. The second suspect in the investigation was Bob, Lindy's direct supervisor. His favorable comments and positive evaluations of Lindy took an unexpected turn. The day before her tragic death, Lindy baked him blueberry muffins for his birthday. Bob spoke so highly of her that police began to question whether he had developed an inappropriate attachment. At 35 years old, single, and without an alibi, Bob caught the attention of the authorities, prompting them to scrutinize him more closely. The pressure became overwhelming, leading him to hire a lawyer to safeguard his privacy. Bob passed a lie detector test and fully cooperated with the police. After clearing both Lindy's husband and Bob as suspects, the police interviewed hundreds of people, including friends, family, and acquaintances. Yet they found no one who might have wanted to harm her. Neighbors were also questioned, but no one reported seeing anything unusual that day. The atmosphere in the apartment complex grew tense as residents began purchasing weapons for protection. While violence in other neighborhoods was concerning, the murder of a young woman next door felt particularly alarming. A note from the police was taped to the Beekler's front door, indicating that it was a crime scene and restricting access for local residents. This served as a constant reminder of the tragedy and the unsettling reality that the killer might still be nearby. The investigation hit a dead end. The only clue from neighbors was a report of an unfamiliar dark-colored car parked outside Lindy's house at the time of her death, with its headlights on. Even if the driver was not involved in the crime, they could have been a witness. However, locating the car proved to be impossible. Neighbors' descriptions varied widely, and no one could recall the license plate number. Meanwhile, the police station was overwhelmed with calls. Although some leads seemed promising, none led to concrete answers, forcing investigators to develop their own theories. One theory suggested that Lindy was being stalked by someone who observed her and her husband's routines, waiting for the right moment to attack. It's possible the intruder entered the apartment while Lindy was unloading groceries, or that it was a burglar who planned to steal valuables, but panicked and assaulted her with a knife when she unexpectedly returned. However, the burglary theory was weak because Lindy's purse, containing her jewelry, was still in the apartment. Additionally, the nature of the abuse assault did not align with typical burglar behavior. The police eventually identified an 18-year-old suspect, who was arrested. He was known for committing terrible acts. He had already attacked 4 women, binding them with their own clothing and stabbing them with a screwdriver. In one instance, when a victim attempted to flee, he chased her in his car and tried to run her over. The location and timing of his crimes made the police suspect his involvement in Lindy's attack. However, investigations revealed he was not connected to that incident, as he was at work that day, supported by multiple colleagues. In December 1976, Lindy's family visited her grave to pay their respects. What they found left them in shock. Someone had vandalized the grave. The headstone was covered in knife marks. Pieces of it were scattered nearby, and the rest was splattered with red spray paint. The police took this incident seriously, as they believed the vandal might have also been involved in Lindy's death. The use of a knife suggested the vandal was aware of how Lindy had died, and notably, only her grave had been targeted in the entire cemetery. Since the family had kept the burial location private, it indicated that the vandal had intentionally sought it out, possibly by following family members. Unfortunately, the detectives were unable to identify the culprit. An entire year went by without any answers, leaving Lindy's family in a state of confusion and distress about what happened to her. In the following years, detectives looked into many people who were connected to Lindy's life. They examined her mother's boyfriend, looked into frequent customers of the flower shop, and even explored possible connections to serial killers active in Pennsylvania at that time. In their search for answers, they even consulted psychics. Despite these efforts, the case of Lindy Beekler's death remained unsolved. 25 years after Lindy's tragic death, the lead detective retired, leaving the Lindy case as one of the oldest unsolved cases in Lancaster County. In 2006, the investigation into Lindy's death was transferred to a special group in Pennsylvania that focused on old unsolved cases, utilizing new techniques and perspectives. However, they too were unable to make any progress. Decades after his wife's death, Philip Beekler discovered the DNA analysis techniques used to convict the perpetrator. He believed these methods could also be applied to his wife Lindy's case. In 2019, police applied these techniques to analyze DNA from the crime scene and created a composite sketch of a potential suspect based on the DNA. A computer program produced two portraits. One depicted how the suspect likely appeared at the time of Lindy's attack, and the other showed what the suspect might look like at age 65. While the portraits weren't exact representations, they revealed important details about the suspect, including fair skin, brown eyes, dark hair, and possible distinctive features. Despite this progress, locating the suspect was still difficult. The DNA sample was analyzed by C.C. Moore, a well-known American genetic genealogist. She discovered that the DNA found on the victim's underwear in 1975 was connected to a small town in Italy. Moore invested a lot of time identifying individuals with Italian ancestry who were living in Lancaster County at the time of Lindy's murder. She traced the migration patterns from this small Italian town to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. After ruling out over 2,000 individuals with similar genetic profiles, she was able to use public records to narrow it down to one suspect. This led her to identify the likely killer, a man named David Sinopoli. Investigators checked the name against existing databases, but found no records. This man had never been noticed by the police before, and his name was not on any suspect lists. However, while reviewing the case files, detectives learned that David lived in the same apartment complex as the Beeklers. To establish his connection to Lindy's death, they needed to obtain David's DNA. On February 11, 2022, David was at Philadelphia International Airport waiting for his flight. To pass the time, he bought coffee, not realizing that police were observing him from afar. After David finished his coffee, he threw the empty cup into a trash bin. An officer then discreetly collected the discarded cup and placed it in a plastic bag for further examination. The cup was sent to a lab for DNA analysis, which revealed a match between the DNA on the cup and the seminal fluid found on Lindy Beekler's underwear, confirming that David Sinopoli had been at the crime scene. Additionally, 2 drops of blood found on her stockings matched his DNA, providing further evidence. Initially, investigators thought the significant amount of blood at the crime scene belonged to the victim. However, they also considered the possibility that the perpetrator had injured himself and left behind traces of his blood. On July 17, 2022, around 7 a.m., police arrived at David's home, a few miles from the site where Lindy was murdered years earlier. He did not resist arrest, but his wife, who had been married to him for 36 years, was completely shocked. They had 3 children and 9 grandchildren, all of whom were unaware that they had been living with a criminal and murderer. Following the tragic murder of 19-year-old Lindy, David had lived quietly for nearly 47 years, never revealing his past and believing he would escape punishment. After David was arrested, Lindy's family had a reason to celebrate. Unfortunately, many family members never got to see justice served. Lindy's father died in 2000, and her mother followed in 2007. Her husband, Philip, was still alive and had remarried around 1990. Even though he hadn't initially planned to, he wanted to honor Lindy's hopes for him by finishing college, attending graduate school, and becoming an artist, which he accomplished. Eventually, he was able to let go of the tragedy and move forward with his life. The day after David's arrest, the police held a press conference announcing that they considered the case of Lindy Beekler's murder closed. Friends and family of David struggled to believe he was involved, thinking there must have been a misunderstanding. However, it's painful to acknowledge that this man evaded consequences for his actions for nearly 50 years, living as if nothing had happened after taking a young woman's future. Years went by, but the police never forgot about the case and continuously worked to solve it. Eventually, justice was served. David Sinopoli was taken into custody without the option for bail. Initially, he strongly denied any connection to Beekler's death, but as the trial date approached, he changed his mind and agreed to a plea deal. On October 19, 2023, 48 years after the crime, David Sinopoli pleaded guilty to third-degree murder, aggravated assault, and burglary. He received a prison sentence of 25 to 50 years. The judge mentioned that considering the defendant's age, this effectively amounted to a life sentence. David never explained why he killed Lindy by brutally stabbing her 19 times and violating her body to fulfill his selfish desires. Lindy and David were neighbors in the same apartment complex, but there is no evidence that they ever interacted prior to the crime. This leaves the true motives behind his actions a mystery, even to the police. It's possible that David was strongly attracted to her and eventually succumbed to his hidden urges. His primal instincts took over, which is why he is now in prison. On January 27, 2017, Cariaga family's peaceful evening in Kitsap County, Washington ended in tragedy when their house caught fire. Upon investigation, authorities discovered 3 bodies inside, all victims of gunshot wounds before the fire was started. 2 days later, another member of the Cariaga family was found shot and burned in his truck deep in the woods. This was not a random act. Someone was determined to eliminate this family. But who were they, and what were they trying to conceal? The Cariaga family appeared to be a typical close-knit blended family. At the center was John Derek Cariaga, 43, recognized by many in the community for his keen business acumen and generous nature. His wife, Cristal Lynn Cariaga, 37, brought happiness and warmth to everyone around her. Together, they built a stable home and a successful business. John and Cristal married in 2009, each bringing a son from previous relationships into their new family. 16-year-olds Jonathan Higgins and Hunter Schaap brought laughter, energy, and a touch of typical teenage chaos to their home. They were very close, almost like brothers. Outside of their home, the Cariagas were doing well. Cristal operated a popular coffee stand called Cristal's Java Hut, and she and John co-owned Juanito's Taco Shop, a much-loved Mexican restaurant in nearby Bremerton. Their reputation in the local business community was strong. To outsiders, they seemed to be a perfect family, living a happy life. However, underneath this seemingly ideal image, serious issues were developing, issues that went unnoticed by their customers, neighbors, and even their closest friends. It began like any other Friday night. Cristal was hosting friends for what seemed to be a simple, enjoyable gathering. Inside, people chat and relax after a long day. Meanwhile, John was also at home, but his evening changed when he received an urgent phone call. He let his family know he needed to step out briefly to meet someone and promised to return quickly. However, when John returned, he did not come inside. Instead, he remained in the garage. Noticing something was wrong, one of the guests went to check on him. What they overheard was alarming. 3 men were speaking loudly and appeared to be in a heated argument. This unsettling conversation, heard from the darkness of the garage, became the last clue before the night took a tragic turn. As chaos erupted, a frantic call came into Bremerton's emergency dispatch center. On the line was 16-year-old Hunter Shop, terrified and pleading for help. He explained that he and his family had been shot, urgently requested assistance. However, before he could provide more details, the call abruptly disconnected. What followed was horrifying. In a final act of brutality, Hunter was smothered with a pillow and then shot in the head. When first responders arrived, the flames devoured the Cariaga home, which had once been a place filled with love and life. Inside, they discovered the bodies of Christelle, Hunter, Jonathan, 3 lives extinguished in an instant. It was a deliberate, brutal act, and merely a part of a much larger tragedy. 2 days later, a grim discovery was made in a remote area of Mason County, nestled within a quiet tree farm near Belfair. Inside a burned Ford F-150 pickup, the remains of John Cariaga were found. He had been shot, his truck set on fire, and his body left in the woods. A caretaker at the property mentioned something unusual. John had been seen on the land that same day, but he wasn't driving his truck at the time. Combined with details of a conversation John had with 3 men earlier, this raises many questions. Who were the 3 men seen in the garage? The detectives discovered something unexpected. Days after the quadruple murders, more than $50,000 was found in a safe under the master bedroom bed, and $7,000 was found in a bank bag in a closet. Marijuana plants were found in a garage. The killers hadn't taken a single penny, which meant robbery wasn't the motive. Complicating matters further, according to the Kitsap County Fire Marshal's office, firewood, possibly laced with some type of fire accelerant, was placed in beds at opposite ends of the house after Christelle, Hunter, and Jonathan were all dead. Large rocks were then thrown through the windows of the house to further fuel the fire, suggesting the goal was to completely destroy the Cariaga family. As investigators looked closer, a darker reality began to unfold. This is when John's double life came to light. This wasn't merely a random act of violence or a disastrous family feud. Law enforcement revealed that while John managed a family business during the day, he secretly engaged in a high-risk operation, smuggling and selling cocaine, allegedly bringing back kilos from California every few months to distribute in Kitsap County. Some of the people buying cocaine from John were members of the Bandidos MC Bremerton chapter. This life may have ultimately led to his family's tragic fate. An important detail was overlooked. A neighbor of the Cariagas heard gunshots at the house on the day of the murder and reported seeing John Cariaga's truck speed away, with Kelly, a friend of John's, at the wheel and another vehicle closely following behind. Nearly a year after the murder, the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office said Danny J. Kelly Jr. has been identified as a suspect. In January 2018, the Sheriff's Office released surveillance images of Kelly in a Target store from more than a week before the murders. In the store, he was seen wearing clothing associated with the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. In January 2020, FBI detectives and agents announced that Kelly and associates of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club were directly involved in the Cariaga family murders. Detectives working with FBI agents developed a chilling theory. This was not an isolated incident, but a targeted hit orchestrated by members and associates of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. In their world, loyalty is paramount, and betrayal, whether real or imagined, can have deadly consequences. Although the Bandidos claim they are not a criminal organization, the facts suggest otherwise. Members of the club have faced convictions for various crimes. The range of criminal activities associated with them is extensive and alarming, including racketeering, running illegal businesses, banned substance and arms trafficking, assault, money laundering, loan sharking, contract killings, trafficking stolen goods, motor vehicle theft, and counterfeiting. In Washington state, the Bandidos Motorcycle Gang has 14 chapters, is heavily involved in methamphetamine trafficking and violent crime. In 1985, law enforcement conducted a major operation against the Bandidos, arresting 13 members on banned substance and weapon charges in cities like Bellingham, Everett, and Puyallup. This operation was the result of a 16-month investigation involving the FBI, DEA, and ATF, showcasing the seriousness of law enforcement's efforts to combat their criminal activities. The gang's violent nature is evident from a deadly shootout in 2000 between the Bandidos and a rival gang, the Iron Horsemen, at a motorcycle rally. In this conflict, one Bandidos member was killed, another was injured, and a member of the rival gang suffered critical injuries. This altercation was rooted in a banned substance dispute, indicating that the gang's conflicts frequently escalate into violence. In 2005, the criminal activities of the Bandidos were closely examined when 32 members and associates from Washington and Montana faced serious charges. During subsequent raids, law enforcement seized banned substance, firearms, stolen motorcycles, and a significant amount of cash. Many members, including top leaders like the international president and chapter presidents, pleaded guilty. Although there were convictions, some sentences were unexpectedly lenient, and a few members were permitted to remain associated with the club under strict court oversight. Now, let's focus on John's connection to the club. One of Johnny Cariaga's close friends started selling the cocaine he transported from California to Robert Bobby Watson III, a fully patched member of the Bandidos MC Bremerton chapter. It is unknown whether Watson had purchased the cocaine for his own personal use or to resell and profit off of. The friend of John's eventually decided to put a stop to selling, placing John into direct communication with Bobby Watson III as a subsequent result. When John would end up taking his routine trip down to California after this incident, Watson would follow closely behind him, ultimately causing an intense verbal argument between both men. Whatever took place during that confrontation set off a series of events that led to John's entire family being killed just weeks later. The key question now is, was John the only target, or was this assassination meant to make a statement to others as well? Known as Bobby to his friends, Watson was not just a hot-tempered biker. He was the vice president of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club's Bellingham chapter and, according to police, the suspected planner of the Cariaga family massacre. What made the situation even more frightening was Bobby's behavior after the murders. When other Bandidos members questioned him about his involvement, Bobby gave vague answers, avoided direct questions, and provided conflicting accounts of what happened. It seemed as though he either couldn't keep his story straight or didn't care to. Even though Bobby had a high position in the Bandidos, not all members agreed with the violence that occurred. The chapter president publicly denounced the killings, particularly the horrific murders of women and children. He even worked with investigators, stating that there is a clear line between loyalty to the gang and pure brutality. In the biker community, the rules can be unclear, but murdering an entire family was seen as crossing a serious line, even among criminals. Then there was Johnny James Watson, Bobby's younger brother from Bellingham. Johnny was not a member of the Bandidos and, according to available records, had no direct involvement in the gang's illegal activities. However, being Bobby Watson's brother made him a suspect by default. Questions arose. What did he know? What had he heard? And most importantly, what part, if any, did he play in these events? One of the most heartbreaking aspects of this story involves Danny J. Kelly Jr. Although Kelly was not an official member of the Bandidos, he was very much involved. As a hangaround, he was seen as a prospective member eager to earn his place in the group. With Bobby Watson being his connection to the inner circle, Kelly often wore Bandidos supporter gear and openly expressed his ambitions. However, what makes his story particularly tragic is that years prior, Kelly was among John Cariaga's closest friends. In fact, John chose him to be the best man at his wedding. It was a friendship that should have lasted forever, but things took a wrong turn. Their bond fell apart when John accused Kelly of stealing from him, an accusation that shattered any remaining trust. After years of diligent investigation, the details of the Cariaga family case finally came together, leading law enforcement to establish a special task force dedicated to uncovering the truth behind the brutal quadruple murder. This was not just another forgotten cold case. It became an urgent mission aimed at bringing the perpetrators to justice for the pain they inflicted. The evidence mounted, and eventually 3 men, Danny J. Kelly Jr., Robert Bobby Watson, and Johnny James Watson, who were believed to have planned and carried out the attack, were arrested. Their names, once merely whispered in private conversations, now resonated throughout the Kitsap County Jail. Even while in custody, they maintained their innocence against a long list of serious felony charges, including aggravated murder, arson, and burglary. Each faced the looming threat of 16 felony counts hanging over them like a sword on a thread. A judge, understanding the seriousness of their alleged offenses and the danger they posed, denied bail for all three. They were also prohibited from having firearms, alcohol, or banned substance unless prescribed for medical reasons. To avoid any potential coordination among them, the court prohibited contact between the men. It was evident that the system was intent on keeping them apart, isolated, and closely monitored until justice could prevail. In April 2024, a long and intense trial concluded with a verdict that brought closure to a troubling chapter in Kitsap County's history. The court found Danny J. Kelly Jr., Robert Bobby Watson III, and Johnny James Watson guilty on 30 charges, including first-degree murder, premeditated murder, and arson. The severity of their crimes, including the brutal killings and the intentional destruction of a family home, left no room for leniency. As the courtroom prepared for sentencing, the atmosphere was filled with deep sadness as the victims' loved ones came forward to share their memories and grief. Carly Schaap, the mother of Hunter Schaap, made a poignant statement by placing an urn with her son's ashes next to a photo of him at the lectern. 8 relatives, all deeply affected by their loss, addressed the court, reminiscing about their loved ones while pleading with the judge for the harshest possible sentences for the men convicted. Carly and other family members openly expressed the ongoing pain and suffering that have impacted their blended family since that tragic night on January 27, 2017. On May 7, 2024, the court sentenced them to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They would have no chance of freedom. The Cariaga killers would spend the rest of their lives behind bars, held responsible for devastating a family and tearing apart a community. For the investigators who had followed leads, faced setbacks, and pieced together evidence, this outcome was a hard-earned success. It served as a somber reminder of the consequences of violence, but also affirmed that justice, though slow, ultimately prevails. To make matters worse, in another incident, in 2018, they suffered another blow when Joseph Carrega, a young family member, died in a car crash near Huntsville. This additional loss deepened the sorrow and pain already weighing heavily on their hearts. The tragic story of the Cariaga family is a haunting reminder of how deep pain can ripple far beyond the immediate loss, touching the lives of loved ones and entire communities. What was a quiet life ended in unimaginable violence, fueled by a dark underworld that most would rather not see. Even as justice was served with life sentences, the shadows left behind linger. As the dust settles, it leaves you wondering how many more lives are quietly caught in the crossfire of secrets and violence that we may never fully understand.
Bree Kristen Kuhn was born in May 1987 in the United States and grew up with her parents and her older brother, Eric. The family lived in Pennsylvania until her parents divorced. Following the divorce, Bree and Eric moved to Texas with their mother, whose name has not been disclosed. When Eric entered 9th grade, Bree left Texas to live with their father in New York. At that time, their father was in a new relationship with a woman named Karen. Though Bree and her brother Eric lived apart, they remained close, staying in touch on important occasions. However, their relationship with their mother became strained over time. According to Eric, their mother was physically abusive, and Bree would often defend him. She took on the role of a protector, enduring the abuse herself to keep her brother safe. These traumatic experiences profoundly affected Bree, leading her to struggle with depression and anxiety throughout her adolescence. By the age of 13, she had attempted to end her life. In the face of adversity, Bree focused on her education, attending 2 community colleges. While still young, she enlisted in the U.S. Navy, where she served for 17 years at various naval stations across the country. In 2009, she welcomed her first child, a daughter named Kay, with her then-partner, James. Although their relationship ended, Bree retained custody of Kay, while James was granted weekend visitation rights. She later began a relationship with Colin Turner, a fellow service member in the military. Colin James Turner, born on December 28, 1987, was raised in a close-knit, religious family alongside his parents, Tierva Donald Turner, and his sisters, Nicole and Rebecca. Known for his warmth and strong family values, Colin served in the Marine Corps with a specialization in explosive ordnance disposal. He married Casey Gatzman in 2009, and they had a son that same year. After the separation, custody of the children went to Casey, but Colin remained actively involved in his son's care and life. On May 29, 2016, Colin married Bree, and together they started a family with Bree's daughter, Kay. Colin embraced the role of Kay's father, treating her as his own, which deeply endeared her to his family. In April 2017, Bree and Colin welcomed their son, John Patrick, followed by their daughter, Lonnie, in August 2018. After 14 years of service, Colin retired from the Marines and began studying electrical engineering at Arizona State University. He also managed to balance his studies with his responsibilities as a parent, such as helping Kay with distance learning. By this time, the family had settled in Gulf Breeze, Florida, a community recognized for its safety and family-friendly environment. Despite outward appearances of stability, underlying issues were present in Bree and Colin's relationship. She confided to her brother, Eric, that her relationship with Colin was strained. When Eric visited to help mediate, Colin reportedly joked, both privately and in front of Bree, that they got along because they were both narcissistic psychopaths. Eric also noticed Bree felt burdened as the family's sole financial provider, while Colin focused on his studies and childcare. Although Eric encouraged Bree to leave the relationship, she hesitated. Her concerns include that Colin could use her mental health history and his family's finances to gain a legal advantage in a custody battle. In April 2021, she attempted to end her life by overdosing on pills and alcohol while speaking on the phone with Eric. Panicked, Eric contacted Colin, who was at home with Bree but reportedly did not help her. He ultimately called emergency services, and she was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility for 10 days. A month later, she returned to the facility for another week. During her recovery, Bree attributed much of her emotional distress to job-related stress and accused Colin of interfering with her work, which she said exacerbated her difficulties. However, she never publicly accused him of psychological, physical, or emotional abuse. After her hospitalization, she joined an intensive outpatient program and resumed her career at the Naval Air Station in Pensacola. In her role as an assistant to the command chief, Bree was able to continue her treatment while serving under limited-duty sailor status. In the months leading up to the tragedy, Bree began seeking legal assistance. On Wednesday, September 8, 2021, she reached out to a group of mothers on a messaging app, asking for recommendations for a lawyer. She mentioned that the situation could escalate, as it involved disputes over children and property. At 12:53 p.m. that same day, Bree called 911 to report a domestic dispute with her husband, Colin, and requested police assistance at their home. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived at the scene. Colin, her husband, was calmly sitting in a beach chair at the end of the driveway. He informed the officers that Bree had a shotgun, a pistol in the bedroom, and admitted that he also had a firearm in his truck. Colin emphasized that Bree was the one who had called the police. When the officers asked about her whereabouts, he led one of them to the home's entrance and pointed toward the kitchen. As the officer entered, Bree's young son approached, curiously asking about the officer's equipment. Shortly afterward, Bree appeared, looking visibly frustrated. The police officer explained that they could not intervene immediately unless there were obvious injuries or specific evidence of violence. Bree responded bitterly, sarcastically stating that she would make things clearer next time. The officer attempted to de-escalate the situation, explaining that without a court order or restraining order, they could not prevent Colin from seeing or taking the children, especially since 2 of them were biologically his. When asked if she wanted to file a formal complaint, she declined, saying she just wanted to leave the house with her children. The officer informed her that he would speak to Colin while she gathered her belongings. While the officers were speaking with Colin, Bree began transferring items from Colin's truck to hers. Noticing this, Colin firmly stated that he would not allow her to take the children. He argued that he was their primary caregiver and claimed that he intended to take them to his parents' home in Georgia for a few days to let tensions cool down. He also denied having any intention of keeping the children away from Bree. One of the officers advised Colin that, as long as no violence was involved, parenting disputes were not matters for police intervention. When asked if he wanted to file a formal report, he agreed. The officers retrieved paperwork from their patrol vehicle and provided forms to both parties. When Bree saw her form, she asked what she should do if her husband hit her after they left. The officer advised her to use her phone's camera to document any evidence. The officers then departed. A few hours later, around 5 p.m., there was another 911 call from their home, this time from Colin. When the police arrived again, they found Colin outside, holding the youngest child. He told the officers that Bree was refusing to let him back into the house. She then went outside and tried to take the child from his arms. The officers intervened and asked Bree to go back inside to allow for a calm discussion. After confirming that Colin lived in and co-owned the house, an officer informed him that he had the legal right to enter the property, though they discouraged him from using force. The officer emphasized that Colin's access to the home was a lawful right. Concerned about another confrontation, he requested that the officer accompany him inside. Colin explained that Bree had attempted to take the child into the house, but the child had started screaming, refusing to go in without him. When the officer asked if any physical conflict had occurred, Colin said no but mentioned that the situation was part of a long-standing dispute that had lasted for years. Bree, on the other hand, told the officers that they were discussing divorce and claimed Colin intended to take the children to Georgia. She further accused him of being physically aggressive, adding that the earlier police visit had failed to protect her. She also alleged that Colin had contacted her superiors at work and possibly made claims of emotional abuse. The officer reiterated to Bree that she could not legally prevent Colin from entering his own home. He suggested they work out a temporary arrangement, such as staying in separate bedrooms and minimizing contact, for the well-being of their children. However, Bree refused, expressing concern that allowing Colin inside could lead to more violence. She again brought up her previous allegations of abuse and expressed fear of being harmed. The officer advised her to document any future incidents, but it was clear Bree was seeking more than just advice. She wanted protection that the current system was not equipped to provide. When the officer suggested that everyone enter the house together, Bree refused. The officer then turned to Colin, who calmly provided the children's information. During the exchange, he mentioned Bree's mental health issues. Police confirmed this and said that he had previously intervened in an incident at their home in March, when Bree attempted to harm herself. Police reminded Colin of the same advice they had previously given him, to remain separated within the home for the safety of everyone involved. He also pointed out that standing outside in the intense heat with a small child amidst biting mosquitoes was unsustainable. Before heading inside again, Colin asked the officer to retrieve his wallet, which Bree had allegedly taken from his vehicle. At the door, Bree met the officer. When asked about the wallet, she denied having it and claimed she had only taken Colin's credit card. The officer reminded her that a wallet is personal property, not something to be shared in marriage, and instructed her to return it if she had taken it. In a calm but firm tone, the officer told Bree she had to allow Colin and their daughter back into the house. Bree agreed, but only on the condition that Colin would not harass her or the children. The officer reassured her that if anything happened, she could call them again. As the officer prepared to leave, he returned to inform Colin that Bree claimed she did not know where the wallet was. Colin just smiled and implied that he would let the matter slide. But in reality, nothing was resolved satisfactorily. Less than 2 hours later, at exactly 6:22 p.m., a third and final 911 call came from their residence. Colin James Turner, just 33 years old, had been fatally shot. The final fatal gunshot rang out while the 911 operator was still on the line. On the porch, officers found Bree, then 34, sitting calmly. As they approached, she spontaneously confessed that she had shot her husband. She was taken into custody without resistance. When asked about the children, she said she had taken them to a neighbor who lived a few houses down. Paramedics checked her over while officers ensured that she was physically stable. When asked if she could breathe properly or needed medical care, she didn't respond, so emergency personnel were instructed to evaluate her. Bree was brought to the police station for questioning. The interrogation was slow, interrupted by long silences and frequent bouts of crying. During the interview, Bree opened up about the state of her marital relationship. She said Colin was the primary caregiver for their children and admitted that she believed she had little chance of winning custody due to her history of mental health struggles. She revealed that Colin had threatened to take the children to Georgia and had physically assaulted her. He had also warned that if she reported him, no one would believe her because of her mental health issues, calling her crazy. Bree confessed that she had removed the batteries from the garage door opener to stop Colin from leaving with the children. She claimed that Colin only pretended to care about her mental health as a way to manipulate her, especially after she decided to file for divorce. She mentioned that she had a legal appointment scheduled for the next day. She also mentioned that she had an appointment with a lawyer scheduled for the next day. When asked what had happened just before the attack, Bree said her memory after the second police visit was hazy. She recalled Colin attempting to enter the house through the garage but failing because the way was blocked. However, she said he then used a side door to enter the house. She claimed she tried to stop him, but her next clear memory was knocking on a neighbor's door. She remembered leaving her children there to ensure their safety before returning home to help her husband. Investigators pressed her for a more comprehensive account, but she could only provide scattered details. She said she returned to the garage and saw blood everywhere. Throughout the questioning, Bree repeatedly asked to call her father. Eventually, she was allowed to make the call, which lasted 18 minutes and consisted mostly of sobbing. Her father tried to comfort her, suggesting she would likely spend the night in jail and urging her to seek help if she felt like harming herself again. He reassured her that things could improve and told her to stay strong and look for hope. Toward the end of the call, Bree asked if her father could take custody of her two youngest children. He didn't give a definitive answer, suggesting instead that they would need to discuss it with Colin's mother. He also advised her to cooperate with a public defender if necessary until a more suitable legal option became available. At the end of the call, Bree painfully confesses, she doesn't know what's worse, knowing that Colin is dead or realizing that she was the one who killed him. A month later, in early October 2021, Bree was indicted by a Santa Rosa County grand jury for first-degree premeditated murder in connection to the death of her husband, Colin. Prosecutors had not yet decided whether to seek life imprisonment or the death penalty. On October 16, Colin's family and friends gathered for a military funeral to honor his 14 years of service in the U.S. Marine Corps. During the ceremony, the American flag symbolizing his service was presented to his eldest son, Brody Turner. The youngest children of his were adopted by his parents, who always strived to love and support him despite enduring an irreparable loss. After 3 years of delays, Bree's long-awaited trial began on Tuesday, September 24, 2024, at the Santa Rosa County Courthouse. Now 37 years old, Bree faced accusations of committing a premeditated and calculated act of murder. The prosecution carefully outlined the events of September 8, 2021, arguing that Bree intentionally killed her husband following a day of escalating conflict. Meanwhile, the defense presented a drastically different narrative, asserting that Bree was a victim of battered woman syndrome. They argued that she had endured years of psychological and emotional abuse from Colin, who had become increasingly unstable after suffering a traumatic brain injury during his military service. The defense maintained that he posed a significant threat to her and their children. Over 4 days, the court heard testimony from various witnesses. The jury and those in the courtroom reviewed full body cam footage from responding officers, which captured their interactions on the day of the incident. The recordings revealed Bree's sarcasm, Colin's calm demeanor, and the chilling 911 call during which gunshots were recorded in real time. Every officer involved testified, including one officer who described the crime scene in detail, recounting the sight of the garage, blood, Colin's body slumped in a chair, and a holstered weapon nearby. A crime scene analyst presented a series of photographs to help jurors visualize where Colin's body was found. Evidence collected included shell casings, bullet fragments, and Colin's phone, which was still connected to the 911 operator, lying beneath him. Prescriptions for Bree's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and mental health treatment were submitted as evidence, along with testimony from her supervisor, Craig Forum, from the Pensacola Naval Station. Craig explained that Bree had been placed on limited duty due to mental health issues. He said that on the day of the shooting, Bree did not show up for work, and Colin called him to inform him that Bree had cut off the family's financial access and damaged the electronics in the house. Colin also told Craig that she had missed therapy sessions and that he was considering moving the children to Georgia. Craig testified that Colin remained calm and spoke in a composed manner throughout the call. He also provided Colin with contact information for a family counselor. Soon after, he spoke to Bree, who accused her husband of lying and being unreasonable in taking the children away. On the trial's second day, forensic pathologist Dr. Diana Oleski was called to testify for the prosecution. Although she did not personally perform Colin's autopsy, she reviewed the results and formed her conclusion. The autopsy revealed that Colin had been shot 4 times, all from behind. The bullets entered between his shoulders and chest. One particularly devastating shot passed through his left shoulder, exited the side of his neck, and lodged in his right wrist. The injuries caused extensive trauma, including punctured lungs, fractured ribs, damage to cervical vertebrae, a ruptured spleen, spinal cord injuries, and damage to the pericardium, the heart's protective membrane. Diana concluded that Colin would have survived for only a few minutes following the pericardial injury. When the defense attorney asked if there was any evidence to indicate that Colin's arm was broken, since he had claimed during the 911 call that Bree had tried to break his arm, Diana responded that there were no signs of injuries consistent with that statement. Eric, Bree's brother, was the next to testify. He recounted a phone conversation with Bree months earlier, on the day she attempted to end her life. During that call, she told him she had taken pills mixed with alcohol. Eric stated that when he informed Colin of this, Colin showed no concern and took no action to help, prompting Eric to step in and call for assistance. Eric also mentioned that Bree had always feared losing her children, believing Colin's family's wealth and legal resources would work against her. On the day of the attack, Eric said Bree was especially anxious because she had an upcoming surgery and feared that Colin would use that time to take the children. He recalled speaking to Bree several times that day, noting her mood alternated between calm and distressed. During their final 45-minute call, Eric said he overheard Bree arguing with Colin, followed by shouting and the sound of objects being thrown. He claimed that Bree had then picked up a weapon. When asked how Eric knew this, he hesitated, saying he believed Bree had told him. Eric begged her to leave with the children, but she didn't listen. The call ended with Bree saying that she was not going to take the kids, followed by the sound of gunshots, crying children, and Bree repeatedly saying that she had killed him and that she needed to call the police. However, Eric's testimony was inconsistent under cross-examination. His account differed from his initial statements to detectives in Pennsylvania. He attributed these contradictions to the claim that his first interview had not been recorded, a claim the detective denied. With that, the prosecution rested its case. The defense initially planned to present Bree's defense through testimony from a mental health expert and Bree herself to explain battered woman syndrome. However, they unexpectedly changed strategy, opting not to present these testimonies and offering no public explanation for their decision. Instead, the defense called James, Bree's ex-husband and the father of her eldest daughter, Kay. James testified about the incident on the day of the shooting. He stated that he exchanged text messages with Colin and later received a phone call from Bree. During the call, Bree had told him that he needed to come get Kay and that she had just shot Colin. When he had asked why, she had responded that she didn't know. James immediately went to pick up his daughter. James also testified in court that he had always thought highly of Colin as a stepfather and that Kay had spoken positively about him. On the third day of the trial, proceedings were interrupted by a hurricane warning, delaying closing arguments until Friday, September 27th. During the prosecution's closing argument, they emphasized that Bree showed no visible injuries on the day of the shooting. They argued that Bree deliberately provoked Colin, secretly filmed the confrontation on her phone, and kept her brother on the line during the incident. They contended that her motive was not self-defense but a desire to assert control. The prosecution concluded that, being unable to provoke aggression from Colin, Bree attacked him 4 times in the back without realizing he was on a 911 call. The defense argued that Colin had been walking around the house with a firearm and suggested he hid the weapon in his truck before police arrived. They referenced Colin's 911 call, where he claimed Bree tried to break his arm, a claim contradicted by the autopsy. One of the defense attorneys mocked Colin's actions during the call, asserting that, as a Marine, he should have handled the situation differently, further implying that his response would have been ridiculed by others in his military unit. The defense ultimately claimed that Bree resorted to attacking Colin because law enforcement had repeatedly failed to protect her despite her pleas for help. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict. During the sentencing hearing, the judge allowed Colin's parents to speak about the impact of the incident. Colin's mother expressed gratitude for having custody of her grandchildren and stated her intent to adopt them. She condemned Bree not only for taking her son's life but also for attempting to tarnish his reputation. Colin's father spoke of his sadness and disappointment in Bree's actions, sharing that the children were doing well in school and surrounded by love. The judge then sentenced Bree Kristen Kuhn to life in prison. Although the verdict has been announced, the case is not over yet. On October 3, 2024, Bree's legal team filed an appeal with the Florida Court of Appeals, challenging her conviction and requesting a new trial. Meanwhile, Bree was discharged from the U.S. Navy with a general discharge under honorable conditions after 17 years of service, thus avoiding further military disciplinary action.